What were the most surprising things for deaf people who gained hearing later on in life? My cousin was born deaf and went through an operation to recover part of his hearing when he was 12. He sometimes uses hearing aids, but he can get by without them in general. His family had a bunny, Tupu. Of course, he'd learned about cows mooing, cats meowing, all the usual farmyard animals before he'd had his surgery. He was very shocked when he came home and greeted his bunny that it made no sound. It took the longest time for him to understand that bunnies are pretty quiet animals in general. He explained that he thought all pets were loud. My old roommate in New York City got implants at, I think he was 25 or 26. He was shocked that the radiators in the house didn't make noise. He could feel them and was absolutely sure, given their shaking and vibrating from time to time, that they were going to be quite noisy. On the flip side, he was deeply annoyed by the buzz of fluorescent lighting, which he did not expect to make that much noise. I had a child friend that gained hearing, and she didn't realize you could control the volume of your voice. So when I whispered to her, she said, "Hang on, I think I need to adjust my hearing aid." At first I just thought, oh, it mustn't be working, until I realized what was going on. She whispered to me for about 2 weeks solid just to practice. Yes, she also practiced shouting, but we did that in secluded woodlands. My friend got his hearing at age 6. He swears to this day that he thought flowers would make some sort of noise, and that's what attracted bees. Nernroot makes a sound to attract adventurers, actually. I went deaf due to illness, probably around the age of 4 months. Got my hearing back at around 8 years old through surgery. I used to think traffic lights should make a noise. Street signs too. Like when a stop sign has a blinking light for added visibility, I think that's actually where I got the idea in my head. They're trying to get your attention, right? So of course they must put sirens in all the traffic lights. My mum says I used to hold my ears when we'd drive through an intersection, though I don't remember that part. I've been wondering if when all of these people get their hearing, whether it's as sensitive as a child's or maybe kind of dulled because of the surgical nature of the correction. The fact that some of these people seem quite distressed by sirens or fluorescent lights suggests the former. Well, after my cochlear implant, I started hearing a lot of things that I never knew existed. But here are a few things that I thought would make a noise, but they didn't. First, I expected the light bulbs to hiss or a flickering sound when you turn them on, and I was so disappointed. Second, I thought you could hear your eyes close, like a blink, but there's no sound when you close your eyelids. There's no whoosh. Third, you know how wind makes a noise going through trees? I thought it would make more noises going through hair. Nope. Fourth, now I could hear soft sounds, but I still get spooked when I see a bug crawling and I don't hear it. They don't make a noise at all. And finally, going number 2 does not make a sound, only the splash into the toilet. I thought the body makes a noise to push it out. I was disappointed. I got waterproof hearing aids. Taking a shower scared the ever-loving Christ out of me. I have a cochlear implant on one side, hearing aid on the other. I don't use waterproof unless I go swimming. One time after swimming, I decided to keep them on when I was showering, and I got shivers down my spine. My daughter suffered from recurring ear infections that went on for over a year before I could get the doctors to push for tubes in her ears. I felt that she was either unable to hear that, or it was very muffled. The doctor that placed the tubes confirmed my suspicions, stating that she most likely heard noise as though she was underwater. I cannot attest to what exactly she expected to make a noise, but I still tear up when I think about her face as she re-explored the entire house with renewed fascination. I can, however, give my subjective opinion based on her facial expressions. The thing that sticks out the most is the refrigerator. She was in awe over the humming noise that thing makes, a noise that we often tune out because we're so accustomed to it, right? As she focused on that appliance for a bit, she made her way around to everything else that was large and stood in front of it as if she was expecting everything to have its own secret noise. I can't say for sure, but the amount of time that she stayed with her face pressed up against the inactive washing machine and dryer leads me to believe with almost certainty that she was expecting those to hum and whir as well. At her age, you wouldn't expect her to make a correlation between similarly sized appliances, but I'll be damned if it didn't appear that way. I had a friend who was born deaf but got hearing aids. She always thought people yawning was people randomly screaming, so it always confused her why people would be screaming in the library, movies, at church, and in public. She never asked why people were screaming because she thought it was normal. After she got the hearing aid, she thought she'd be hearing people scream when they yawned. A former coworker went to RIT, where they've got a school for the deaf. In the summertime, hearing all of the deaf students loudly doing the deed with the windows open because they don't realize how loud they are was one of the funniest things going on there, according to him. My coworker and her husband are both deaf, but none of her 4 kids are. I can only imagine the noises those kids hear. I have friends that go to RIT and I used to visit them regularly. Can confirm, the deaf kids are real loud. Candles or fire? I regained my hearing at the age of 2, so I was absolutely heartbroken when I discovered that birthday candles did not make any sounds while burning. Also, I expected flashing lights to make some sort of noise. Not really sure what I expected exactly, but maybe like a siren or a loud bang. I couldn't hear until I was about 4 years old. I remember being surprised that trains were relatively quiet for their size. Question: if you lose your hearing, can you still have tinnitus? That would be a nightmare to have ringing in your ear without any other sound to mitigate it. Okay, a quick Google search has brought up, being hearing impaired doesn't exempt you from these kinds of sounds, unfortunately. Deaf people are more likely to have tinnitus, in fact. It's thought to be linked to the damage that caused the deafness itself. I got my hearing at 7, and I thought that grass would make a squeaky noise when you stepped on it. I was a weird kid. My dad progressively went deafer as his life went on, and was almost 100% deaf by around age 20. He got a cochlear implant when I was around 7 years old, put them in, asked my mum, "Are the kids always this damn loud?" and proceeded to take the cochlear implant off so he didn't have to listen to my little brother and I yelling. I always thought that was funny. I was born with tons of fluid in my ears and only had very slight hearing at best. When I was 6 months old, I had a surgery that put tubes in my ears to drain said fluid. My mum says that when I came home from surgery, I went to my toy box and shook every toy in it to see what sounds they made. Honestly, it wasn't that serious, but it did lead to some auditory processing issues, and I had to see a speech therapist until I was 7. Crazy what a difference 6 months of hearing makes that early on. My 3-year-old son is deaf, and we just had a visit this morning from his signing teacher who's also deaf herself. She recently had cochlear implants fitted, and while we were talking and signing, she said, I'm sorry, I can't concentrate. I can hear a horrible constant noise. It's not stopped the whole time I've been here. Turns out it was the rain on my conservatory roof. Okay, this is furthering the idea that when people get their hearing back, they get complete spidey sense. Although on reflection, I'm sure depending on the procedure and whether they had hearing beforehand, there's a large degree of difference. Not me, but when I was in high school, a bunch of kids would meet in a nearby no man's land and hang out before school started. I spent most of my mornings loudly talking to my almost deaf friend. One day he showed up and said he had a new hearing aid. I didn't have to yell at him to get him to hear me anymore. Yay! A few minutes later, he asked what that noise was. I asked which noise, listening and hearing nothing out of the ordinary. I don't know, it's like a weird beeping, almost musical. Really bizarre, but actually kind of pleasing. Took me a minute to realize that my man was hearing bird song for the first time in his life. That was a pretty cool moment. My dad was born with severe hearing loss, but it wasn't detected until he was 50. His parents just thought he was ignorant if he didn't answer them. It's quite sad, actually. His parents definitely failed him. He's also dyslexic, and it's affected every part of his life and self-worth. Anywho, my mum told him he needed a hearing test because the TV was starting to deafen her. She thought, oh, it's just years of loud music and using a shotgun occasionally. So he has this hearing test and some other tests and gets told he's actually born deaf in one ear and has significant loss in the other. He can't hear phonics. You can imagine his problems through life. He finally gets hearing aids, and the first day he sits down and eats a packet of crisps, and he absolutely flips out. What the F is that noise? Holy crap, my head is exploding. We had to explain that you can hear the crunching of food and stuff, and some foods are louder than others. It was heartbreaking to see what he's missed out on. Now he only uses his hearing aids after a good nag from my mum. We still have to put up with his noisy eating, but he's back to ignorance is bliss. My godfather and dad's lifelong best friend. He was born with hearing, but lost it before age 2 due to some health issues. Went his entire childhood deaf, and in his 20s he finally got a hearing aid. At the time, he and his wife were living in the downtown of a large city. Apparently, he had it about 2 weeks before he threw it out, saying everything was too loud, he hated the noise and sound, and that things were more peaceful without it. 15 years later, he moved out into the country on a few hundred acres of wood. Still, he refused to wear a hearing aid and kept refusing for the next 10 years. Finally, his wife convinced him to give it a try, and his mind was blown. He couldn't believe how quiet everything was and how much he enjoyed hearing. He finally explained that he thought the noise of the traffic downtown was the wind and that it would sound like that everywhere all the time. So for more than 25 years, he thought wind sounded like hundreds of cars driving by. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My girlfriend is not deaf, but she is hard of hearing, which for her means that she can't hear high-frequency sounds. She recently got hearing aids that amplify the frequencies that she can't hear, and was shocked to find out that birds and crickets chirp, to the point that she thought the birds were trying to attack her and was horrified that we were surrounded by millions of bugs when I explained what the crickets were. It just goes to show what peace of mind one could obtain from not hearing, and how deaf or hard of hearing people interpret the world completely differently than people who hear normally do. These comments have been super interesting. I never thought about this before. I hope your girlfriend's been able to put her mind at rest about the birds and crickets. One of my newly hearing-enabled friends basically said, "How the frick do you normies stand all of this noise?" I swear I've read somewhere that most people expect the sun to make noise, but for the life of me I can't seem to remember where. I mean, if Teletubbies is to be believed, it makes the sound of a laughing baby. I thought it would make a sizzling sound. It's a giant ball of fire. It's hard not to think it makes any noise at all. I was deaf for a very long amount of time, but when I got some machine to fix it, I don't know what it's called, I was just very annoyed by everything. The things I least expected to make noise were just walking and water flowing. One of my close friends in high school has a younger sister who used to be deaf before she got cochlear implants. We were watching a silent movie for a film class, and her younger sister thought that all of those movies made noise. She ran out thinking she was deaf again. We watched it at her home for an assignment. We were pretty quiet. The younger sister just panicked to see a movie playing and no noise because her experience is that movies are real loud. Only realized that she could still hear after she heard the door close. I can't remember what I expected to make noise, but first time I had hearing aids, I found out scratching my skin, brushing my hair, and opening the door made noises. I got freaked out by birds as well. Kitchens are real noisy. I remember trying to figure out a bizarre sound to be described, and it was just bubbling water. Oh, and when people smile, it makes a noise I can only describe as a click as the lips brush against the teeth. It took me 6 years to figure out what it was whilst going from straight-faced to smiling in the mirror with hearing aids on. Open-mouthed smile only. My friends and colleagues love that I can hear them smiling without looking at them now. I was born with impaired hearing, but had an operation to fix it when I was very young. My dad loves to tell the story of me coming home for the first time with clear hearing. I get home, go to the bathroom, do my thing and flush. Except, I'd never heard a toilet flush before. I bolted out of there in tears, screaming for my parents because I couldn't handle the shock that the toilet makes that much noise. I had a cousin who was born deaf and got her hearing fixed at the age of 9. I don't know how, but surgery, I think. They didn't realize that everything made noises. Wind, water, breathing, chewing, and they were annoyed for a few weeks, but then got used to it. My son got hearing aids just about 6 months ago. He had mid-range hearing loss at about 50% total loss. He was shocked at how much noise rain makes. He was also surprised to learn that when he rubs his hand across fabric or leather seats or clothes, that it makes a noise. The poor kid, he had to discover background noise at 12 and then go through the process of making it background noise. The biggest change for him was learning that people have different voices. He could generally tell male from female, but he said that basically all women sounded the same and men all sounded the same as well. I guess vocal timbre was completely absorbed by his hearing loss. Chewing and chomping food, the most annoying noise ever. I had no clue people could make so much noise while eating. Some of them more than others. It still blows my mind how many grown adults make Homer Simpson-like eating noises. But due to the super sensitive hearing factor we've chatted about earlier, I wonder if newly hearing-enabled folks basically find everyone's eating noises repulsive. I thought my member would make a squirting sound when I peed, and I didn't expect just to have a splashing sound instead when I got my hearing back at age 6. Farting became one of my favorite things, and I understood why people would frown at me when I did it. I am profoundly deaf. Born deaf with no residual hearing whatsoever. I had hearing aids that amplified sounds by 140 decibels, and even if I stood next to a jet engine, I wouldn't hear a thing, though I'd feel all of the vibrations. I got a cochlear implant back in 1994 when I was 14. I'm 39 now, so that's 25 years ago. I can hear absolutely anything. If I turned my processor's sensitivity up to maximum, I'd hear my heart beating and breathing. I had problems with hearing fluorescent tubes buzzing loudly when my audiology discovered they made a mistake with the sensitivity levels. Despite being able to hear anything, I can't understand speech at all unless I can lip-read the speaker, where I can understand 50 to 75% of people's speech, as opposed to less than 5% without the processor on. Then there were the surprising things. I'm used to sounds now, but after my big switch on, I was surprised by a range of sounds like the kettle boiling, microwave beeping, the keyboard clicking, things like that. I was most surprised by the noise of indicators in cars. The ticking noise by the indicator was the most surprising. What confused me the most, though, was when I heard this tick-tocking noise, then a quiet roar, then silence, and then the tick-tock would slowly start up again, get a bit more rapid, then the quiet roar, and the cycle would repeat itself several times. I got confused and asked my mum. She laughed and said the tennis was on the TV in the bedroom next door. The quiet roar was the clapping by the spectators. I once read about a deaf guy who expected the sun to be very loud, and he never imagined that showers were that loud either. My friend was not born deaf, but lost his hearing due to a lifetime of loud, heavy equipment use. He was in his 60s when he finally relented and got himself a hearing aid. He stopped by my office to exclaim how much better life was since receiving the device. "I can hear the breeze and the birds again," he says. "Rain, water trickling in brooks, it's all back. I feel like a young man again. There's so much detail to sound that I'd forgotten all about." "That's wonderful," I exclaim. "What kind is it?" He looks at his watch and says, about 3:45. I wasn't born deaf, but developed chronic ear infections in my left ear around 6 months of age, and as a result, my eardrum and bones of hearing were completely destroyed, and left me almost completely deaf in my left ear by the time I was 5 to 6. As a result, I never really got to know what it was like to hear in stereo. At the age of 28, I had a surgery that was able to replace the bones of hearing with a single titanium piece and rebuild an eardrum. I was told it would take 6 months for my brain to relearn how to interpret the audio signal. But when I woke from surgery, I was instantly assaulted by what felt like a wall of sound. It was quite painful. At the time, I had 3 kids, ages 8, 5, and 3. One of the biggest shocks to me was the sheer volume of noise that my children could make. The first day we were home, I turned to my husband and asked, "Have our kids always been this loud?" The other biggest shock was surround sound. A year or so before my surgery, my husband had gone out and spent a good sum of money on a surround sound system for our house. I was livid. What a waste of money. The first time we watched a movie in surround sound after my surgery, however, I was in awe. My husband just laughed at me as I kept turning from side to side, saying, "Did you hear that? Things are actually moving around the room." When the movie was finished, I sat in stunned silence for a moment before turning to him and saying, "Oh, I get it. That was worth every penny." My professor, who is deaf, said that she came home one day from class and her roommate asked her if she was hungry. The professor said, "Yes, I'm starving. I haven't eaten all day, but how do you know?" The roommate explained that she could hear her stomach grumbling. My professor freaks out that her organs make noise and other people can hear inside her body. My class was dying from laughter. I was born with hearing, but I began losing it when I turned 1, and my parents didn't realize that I wasn't able to hear anymore. But when they finally figured out that I couldn't actually hear and got bilateral cochlear implants, I was very surprised to find out that bugs, like ants and spiders and the like, don't make noise. I always just assumed that if you could feel something move, it had to make a noise. I was born deaf and got a cochlear implant when I was 27. I can hear better, but I rely on lip reading as well. I had no idea that going to the bathroom makes so much noise and that people could hear all kinds of embarrassing noises. It explains many weird looks I got before. I sometimes work with a guy with a deaf son who got a cochlear implant. He thought people were mispronouncing the word for because it didn't rhyme with hour. Even for a lifelong hearer, that's a good question. Was born with hearing loss. I'm in my mid-30s now and I recently got 2 hearing aids. I had no idea that the world was so loud. Apparently the elevators at work make a beeping sound when they arrive at their destination. And a loud one too. Papers make noise as well if you look through them. I had no idea. And when my cat parades around the house, I hear its nails on the wooden floor. Flushing a toilet is so loud, I'll take my aids out before I do it. I was born deaf but received an implant early, at 2.5 years old. I expect everything to make noises, but I didn't expect the night to be that creepy. I stayed up during the night to watch TV and, my god, too many different noises. I'm glad I can't hear during the night when I turn that thing off. I have a question for you non-deaf people. How do you sleep at night with all these noises? It must be scary as hell. Well, I'm only hearing impaired, but god damn the world is noisy. There's nothing better than coming home, taking out your hearing aids, and finally letting your brain relax. But the thing that surprised me the most was how loud toilet flushes are and damn crunchy leaves in the fall.
Teachers of Reddit, have you ever had a crush on a student? And if so, how did you feel about yourself? I used to teach entry-level programming at an art school to undergrads, and later at the graduate level. It happened all the freaking time, but I never felt bad about it, because they were adults and I was the same age. Obviously, I couldn't act on anything as a matter of policy, and I certainly didn't let it affect my grading, but god dang it was difficult, especially with the 2 instances where I could tell it was mutual. Or maybe it wasn't and they just wanted better grades, I don't know. They both got C's regardless. Edit. I get it. D jokes. My dad was my mom's professor in university. They got married. The marriage didn't go well. I am the result of what happens when people try to save a relationship by having a baby. College professor here. I get a lot of gorgeous students, but the attraction usually lasts as long as it takes them to open their mouths. What can I say? When you're in your 30s, 18 to 22-year-olds suddenly seem very shallow and immature to you. Trust me, you will come to think the same way. But then, I had a student who was not only stunningly beautiful, but also very mature beyond her years, and she had a lot of similar interests to me. And what's better, because she was new to America from England, she was also a bit lost and confused, and I told her she could come to me whenever she wanted if she needed advice and guidance. She did for a while, but I never did anything but just talk with her. As attracted as I was to her, trying to make a move would have been a very tricky thing because student-teacher relationships are very taboo. The thing is, though, as she adjusted to America, she started coming by less often because she didn't really need our talks anymore. After the class was over, I hardly ever ran into her anymore, so the opportunity just never presented itself. I look back on it now as a for the best thing. Even if she had been interested in me, and I don't think she was, I'm quite used to my students, even the more mature ones, automatically seeing me as an old geezer, even though I'm 31 now and this was a couple years ago. If I'd had a relationship with her and we'd been caught, it could have potentially been the end of my career, or at the very least it would have gotten me in a lot of hot water. But I also found that shortly after the class ended and I stopped seeing her with any frequency, that she fell out of my thoughts too, and I went back to being interested in women my own age who are preferably not my students. I'm actually glad that it doesn't bother me anymore because I feel like it would be beyond pathetic for someone like me to be so hopelessly in love with a student. I'm 22 and have a senior, so I'd assume 17 or 18, piano student who I most certainly don't have romantic or sexual feelings for. Honestly, the student-teacher barrier comes pretty naturally to me. But I remember after her first lesson being very intrigued/stricken by the fact that she reminds me so much of myself as a high school senior. Same sort of aspirations and motivation, or rather lack thereof for anything that isn't music, that I had at her age. Same sort of unusual taste in music, same dry and sarcastic sense of humor. She's even got a lot of the same weaknesses that I did before going to conservatory, most notably scales, sight reading, and jazz voicings. I don't like her, but I'm fairly certain that high school me would have been all over her. Not me personally, but had a guy that graduated my year 2012, secretly dating our student teacher for AP English in 12th grade. Not a huge thing, she was 4 years older. They started dating 2 weeks into the school year that year, and he got her pregnant. They got married last June. It was a very weird situation for all of us that knew, as she was very open with the girls in the class when our main teacher was out for a few days. Once had a very, very attractive student teacher in my senior year. She was 24, I was 18. A ton of the other students were talking about how bad they wanted to screw her. I became pretty good friends with her. We read similar books, listened to similar music, and one day she asked me for a ride home because her car wasn't working. I drove her to her house and she invited me inside. After talking for about an hour, we went into the bedroom and screwed. We kept it secret from everybody, and after I graduated, we began a stable relationship. We dated for about 2 years until she moved to Washington. I would say she had a crush on me. I teach kindergarten, voice actors note, bear with me here, so I don't exactly get crushes on my students. But as a person that doesn't want any kids themselves, there are a few kids, maybe 1 in 40, where I can't help myself from thinking I'd adopt the crap out of you if you didn't have any parents. It takes a special kid to bring out my paternal instinct. I would bang the majority of the moms, though. I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of influence you have as a young, in your 20s, and successful teacher over high school-age kids. I don't know how to say this, but you kind of get a free in as the young teacher because they can't relate to the more veteran teachers. The kids see a somewhat idealized version of you, and if you wanted to, it is quite easy to take advantage of that trust. This is why teacher-student relationships are avoided by teachers, because it's hard to tell what's real and what is a byproduct of that special mental relationship. If you think your student is the one or something, just keep in touch and hit them up when they're an adult, mentally, not when they hit 18 and graduate. I was a teacher's assistant for a drawing class for a couple of semesters. It was the sort of TA position where the professor would hand you the outline for the semester and you'd teach one of his classes. There was this one girl that looked like a sort of Persian goddess, and she was freaking talented, which drew me to her even more. We got to the part of the class where we started doing portraits. I'd take volunteers from the class and we'd all draw them. I would bounce between critiquing students' work and doing the portrait myself because observing is a great way to learn. The first few went very well. I was on my teaching game and my portraits were up to my standards. Being a good sport, I'd give it to the model when they were done. The first one asked for theirs, and it just sort of became a thing. Then she came up. The thing about drawing is you have to be able to ignore your brain's preconceived ideas of what you are looking at and dissect the visual information analytically. I found her so beautiful. For the first time in my life, I could not do this. I drew, I erased, I drew, I erased. I wasn't bouncing around as much as I had been because I was so frustrated that I could not draw the one person in the class I wanted to draw. We finished, and it turned out okay. Not great, just okay. I still gave it to her, but I was honestly ashamed of it. At the end of the last portrait class, one of the models asked how they'd done. This led to a discussion on how they'd all done. Persian Goddess asked me the inevitable question. I told her she was difficult to draw. She asked why. I immediately regretted my initial response. I think I said something about her features being unusual or something cringeworthy. I wanted to tell her she was too beautiful, but I couldn't. If you're reading this, Persian Goddess, I'm sorry. I should have told you that you were gorgeous. This may not exactly count, but some years ago I taught English in Japan. I'm a woman, and I taught an older female student at her house. Sorry, Reddit, no going where you think. She was quite nice, and one day she asked me to teach a lesson for her son, who was in high school. I agreed. I just came at the usual time and did the lesson with him instead of her. Well, he was a senior in high school. I was in my late 20s, and I thought he was adorable. I don't really feel guilty. My thoughts didn't even begin to approach the sexual side of a crush. I just thought he was cute and sweet. But he definitely had a bit of a crush on me, and our mutual appreciation was probably noticed by the mom. So here is where it gets hilarious. Next week, I come to teach the mom again, and we do the usual introductory conversation at the beginning of the lesson. It was during the rainy season, so I said to her that I missed the sun. She looked very confused for a minute, so I pointed up towards the sky to try and mime what I was talking about. We were in the first floor of her house, and I'm pretty sure I was pointing upstairs to her son's room, so she continued to misinterpret my English. It took me a minute to realize why she had this upset look on her face, and I don't think I was able to save her from her thoughts. After that day, she canceled the class, and I never saw either of them again. As this is not a throwaway, let me restate that I never crossed any lines with their son, even in the privacy of my mind, so I don't really feel bad about the whole thing, but I thought my story might amuse Reddit. Imagine having your relationship be over the intricacies of the English language. And I can only feel bad for the older female student because she couldn't exactly ask her if she meant the giant flaming ball in the sky or her progeny just chilling on the floor right above them. I taught a large lecture class at university level for a number of years. My department head clearly stated that hanky-panky with students was a fireable offense. There were opportunities, but I did not pursue. One situation, though not directly pertinent, stands out. When lecturing, I paid close attention to student reactions. In larger classes, I tended to settle on certain students for my repeated sampling. If they seemed to understand what I was talking about, things were okay. During one lecture on some fairly complex ideas, I had included, among other students, one beautiful co-ed. Until that day, I knew she was beautiful and appreciated her for that, but nothing more. Each time I spot checked, she was paying rapt attention, eyes wide, full of excitement at the knowledge I was dispensing. I was falling in love during my lecture. Such beauty, and she was enthralled with the topic that I totally loved. I required students to do a journal at the end of each class. She obviously had no clue as to what I was talking about. I was deeply puzzled. She had been right there at every point. Later in the semester, I went to a men's basketball game. She was a cheerleader, and one of the prime ones at that. Even while our team was being embarrassed by the visitors, the cheerleaders kept doing their job as if the fans' excitement would make a difference in this lost cause. And she was one of their leaders, eyes wide, showing the same excitement and verve that I had interpreted as her interest in my lecture. I learned a life lesson that day. As someone who has trouble understanding social cues and facial expressions sometimes, I can definitely relate to this. It's hard to know if somebody's face is just being naturally expressive or if they're showing a genuine interest in you. Back in 8th grade, I had this young, super attractive teacher for history. Don't know how old she was, but she had only been teaching for 1 year and was recently married, so my guess was 23 to 24. Anyway, one day I go to her desk to ask her something, and she was standing and leans forward to show me in the book what I need to read/look at. Well, I missed everything she was saying because holy heck, I could see right down her shirt and those knockers had 8th grade me captured. I was totally zoned out just looking and looking. At some point, she stopped talking and noticed what I was doing and just smiled and was looking at me, never stood up or covered up. Our eyes met and she just smiled, winked, and then sent me on my way. The rest of the year was kind of flirty, but she never tried anything. Fast forward 12 to 13 years, and one day randomly on Facebook, I get a friend request from her. Haven't spoke to her since I left the 8th grade. No idea why she added me. Thought, well, maybe she adds all the kids she taught. Well, despite my graduating class having over 1,000 kids, we had no mutual friends. So I waited a while to accept it and then eventually did. Still no friends that were in my grade. Finally, I got creeped out and deleted her. Still have no idea why she did that. Makes me wonder if there was something more behind that. I'm gonna be honest, that dude dodged a bullet. If your teacher's trying to start something with you in 8th grade, that's a red flag right there. I'm surprised nobody got called. I work at an expensive school that teaches 4 to 7-year-olds. A few of my students have moms with husbands that work 80-hour weeks and become very interested in me. One in particular sent her daughter to school with skincare products. Cool? Chocolates, and wine on different occasions. She kept trying to hang out with me outside of school and wanting pictures of me and her daughter together. When she finally got the message that it wasn't happening, she pulled her daughter out of my class and had her quit the school. It was weird. When I was teaching high school level students, it was the reverse. A student had a crush on me. It made things awkward because a few others sensed it. Thankfully, by being consistent and not returning any signs of interest over time, it eventually cooled down and resolved. What's interesting, though, is that most think it's always the teacher having feelings for a student, when sometimes it's the opposite, and it places the teacher in a very uncomfortable, difficult position. If you ask me, it comes down to being professional. You're here to teach, not screw around with other kids. And if you're more focused on your students in that way rather than teaching them for the benefit of their health and the developing mind, then it's not going to help anyone in the long run. It even has the chance to irreparably damage your career. Basically, don't screw kids, it's that simple. Kind of reversed, but when I was in high school, I had a Spanish class that I was very advanced in, given the material. The teacher would often tutor me directly, and things seemingly got a bit flirty sometimes. We ended up actually hooking up one day after class. Homeschool was weird. Not a teacher, but when I was 22, I was the receptionist at a film school, university level, and had quite a flirty relationship with a few of the students, very male-oriented subject, and quite a few attractive ones. I ended up secretly going out with one of the students for 18 months. I would have lost my job if that had gotten out. I teach tutorials at university as a final year grad student. A student, who yes, I did find attractive, hit on me after our last tutorial, asking me out for coffee. I, with some reluctance because he was cute, for context, I am also a guy, politely told him I'd be very busy the rest of the term, but he was welcome to email me next year to keep in touch if he wished. That would be fine. He got the hint. No cute first year is worth throwing away the potential of an academic career. Also, our TA handbook has no rules for this sort of thing, and it really should. Never! The very thought makes me want to shower. Students are children, even the high schoolers. Yeah, I gave that one a funny voice, but seriously, don't screw kids. It's bad. Okay, thanks. Boring answer. I can safely say that I have taught some very attractive young women, but I've never been sexually interested. I mean, they are teenagers. What are they bringing to the party? Enthusiasm? I mean, they are like puppies. Cute, lots of energy, and no training. Sorry, I stopped shopping on the girls' floor immediately after I figured out where the women's department was. That's about the best way I could ever have heard someone put it. Not a teacher, but I have a story that's really odd. He was our grade 9 homeroom teacher. Let's call him Mr. Nee. Mr. Nee was married, had 2 kids and a darling wife who was a counselor at another school. A lot of people liked him, but he was known to choose favorites and non-favorites. I was a definite non-favorite, so I don't really have any kind words to say about him, but I digress. There was this one guy in our class. Let's call him Ev. Ev was a typical wannabe gangster kid, from the saggy jeans to the DC lid. He was actually a really nice guy, but had an attitude at the same time. Me and him have talked once in a while since finishing high school, and he seems to be doing well with his new girlfriend and job. But again, I digress. Remember how I said Mr. Nee had favorites? Well, let's just say the way he treated his favorites looked like crap compared to how well he treated Ev. Ev practically could do anything in that class while everyone else had limits, even the favorites. Ev could come in late to class, not answer questions, and eat and drink whenever he wanted in class. But the one thing I'll never forget is how Mr. Nee would look at Ev occasionally as the class worked on an assignment or test. I really wish I had a picture, then you would probably understand where I'm going with this. It was pretty obvious to the majority of the class Mr. Nee had a thing for Ev, but as you can probably guess, it never went farther than the awkward glance and smile. Ev was completely oblivious to all of this, as he was just happy to have a free class without worry. Who wouldn't be? Mr. Nee still works at my junior high, and sadly, I do run into him a lot on my walks to and from certain places. I'll never know for a fact what Mr. Nee's fixation on Ev was, and it's probably better I don't know. I would just like to know this was just his way of being very nice to his student and nothing else. I used to teach college, and once in every few classes there'd be a really attractive woman, an adult in her early 20s, but a student. Thing being, after 2 or 3 classes, I'd realize I had no attraction to her at all because she just seemed so immature and naive. I don't mean that to sound mean, but I'm attracted to people who have as much life experience as I do, or more. So, much younger people just entering college might look very attractive, and might indeed even be very intelligent, but their sense of what the world was based on cumulative experience seemed fairly limited. So I basically stopped being more than idly attracted to them, the way you'd be when you passed a pretty woman in your office. There was never any real attraction at all. I'm a student, but I have a story I had with my female teacher. I had a teacher who was very attractive. She was 25 years old, blonde, witty, funny, and was also the volleyball coach. She began to drive me to school because she taught there. We lived in the same neighborhood, and I was also one of her favorite students the year before. Not because of great grades or anything. Actually, the opposite. Because I always screwed around in the class and made teaching, quote, fun and exciting for her. Her words, by the way. I also babysat her daughter, and her daughter loved me, so I had that going for me as well. Well, every morning before she took me, her husband, who worked as a garbage man, would be out working and her daughter was usually asleep, so we were alone most of the time. One day, as I watched her daughter and waited for her to get ready, she called from her room and told me to heat up the car and put her daughter outside. As I waited in the car for a while, I was getting pretty bored since her daughter was asleep and I went in to see if she needed any help. Well, I walked in and saw her walking from the bathroom to her bedroom completely topless and she locked eyes with me. I jokingly said, "Whoa, praise freaking Jesus," and did the triangle motion prayer thing and pointed towards the sky. She laughed as she walked back into her room. After this moment, she always seemed to be more flirtatious. She would talk closer to my face, held strong eye contact very often, and even started touching my leg. I reciprocated by also being flirty. I eventually switched schools at the end of the year, and we haven't had any contact since. Just recently, I had to get a recommendation letter for my applications, so I thought who better to ask than my favorite teacher, so I went over to her home. Her daughter had grown so much, and I've never seen a child so happy to see me. I sat down beside my teacher in the kitchen, and we talked for a long time, catching up on things. She said stuff like, "You've grown so much, and I missed you," which seemed mutual because I also missed talking to her. As her daughter watched TV, my teacher did the leg-touching thing again as she whispered about how she was a virgin until college, where she met her husband. She also said that her class is so freaking boring since I left, which I didn't think was completely true. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I was rock hard and she noticed. She said praise Jesus and we both laughed. Then, she grabbed it through my pants. It stopped suddenly when her daughter came up and asked to play with me, so I agreed and I played with her as my teacher wrote the letter of recommendation. After a few hours, I hugged her and her daughter and left the house with an empty feeling. I feel like I could have completed my high school fantasy, but I decided not to that day, mostly because of the fact that she had a husband I respected, and I know I would be really freaking mad if I had a wife who had sex with another person, mostly with a high school student. However, if stuff ever goes wrong with the husband, I will mostly try again. We love a mature person who won't interfere with the married relationship. My 6th grade teacher had a crush on the student teacher that came to help out for a couple months. Although not obvious, they screwed, and he proposed to her in front of the class soon after. They got married and had a kid 2 to 3 years later. For clarity, they screwed outside the bounds of the classroom. The teacher was a total fox as well. I would have loved to park my punch buggy in her garage. Reading that sentence was vile. I work in a school and have never felt this way about a student, but I've known 2 teachers who fell for students, took it too far, and got fired. Each of them were profoundly unhappy people. It seems that's mostly the case for a lot of teacher-student relationships that went south. Outside of abuse of power, these relationships start up to fill a void or indulge an empty desire. 9 times out of 10, it was never about true love in the first place. They never end up pretty unless they're consenting adults, and even then, things can end up pretty strained if they're not communicating with each other. I was 24 and she was 17, and I never did anything, but I totally acknowledged to myself that she was very pretty and clever. It made me feel weird, but I didn't sexualize her or anything. It was more a thought that, wow, if I was 7 years younger, I'd totally be into her. Right, we got it, bro. It is one of the most flattering things for an attractive student to take an interest in a subject that you are teaching. She's an undergrad, and you're TAing a subject that you are deeply interested in. Sure, her questions are novice, but she is enthusiastic and curious about your nerdy field in which you basically toil alone. If you make it past the first year without doing anything stupid, the next year you TA the same class, you meet a whole new year of students, and then you realize that there's a whole new crop of attractive young neophytes who bear a striking resemblance to your first crush last year, and that you are probably going to give more or less the same assistance to your students as last year, until you realize that in class you are helping everyone refine their understanding and move on, while you toil with few peers in the same subject that many will superficially take an interest in and move on year after year. Dude, you good? You need some you need some therapy for that little session? My secondary school English teacher had a crush on me. It wasn't obvious, but I saw it. She was a BBW as classed by my friends. We were 14 at the time. I really did sexualize her and imagine sex with her. I would often stare at her thighs and extremely wide hips in class. She would often pick me out to answer questions and was more relaxed with me while a little strict with others, as if we were good friends. She was a good teacher, definitely. Fast forward a few years and I just finished college. I get a Facebook request from my English teacher. I immediately knew why she added me. She was 22 when she worked with us, and that was what I told my brain when I wanted sex with her. We hooked up and had sex. I lived with her for a couple of months. I moved out, had more sex, etc. That's it, really. She just waited until I was old enough, and honestly, she gave better head than any of the other girls I was with.
What was the most messed up way you got back at someone that wronged you? Throwaways encouraged. Obviously, I'm going to use one. Back in high school, I dated a girl for 6 months before she decided it wasn't working out anymore, and she cheated on me with about 6 guys and stole my iPhone and wallet to buy illicit substances. I wanted to report her to the police like my parents encouraged me to, and to prevent me from doing such, her brother jumped me while I was walking home with his friends and busted open my lip pretty badly and threatened to kill me if I reported him or his sister. This is South Florida, so I believed he would do it. My dad got a new job and we moved to a new city, but I was still angry about this whole situation, so I did the next best thing. I created 2 fake Facebook accounts of a random hot girl and guy, spent some time making it look legit with friends and such, and added her brother on Facebook with the girl and my ex with the guy. It wasn't too long before he started flirting me up and tried his best to get in this girl's undies. On the other hand, having already courted my now ex, I knew exactly what to say to charm her to the point that she was in love with me. This was where it all started to get fun. I started a naughty texting relationship between the brother and sister, with me as the intermediate thanks to Google Voice. Both of them had fairly typical South Florida bodies, so nothing really gave anything away, and I did a fair amount of photoshopping to remove identifiers in the room that may give away anything. This went on for about a month and a half, totaling about 200 or so naked photos between the two of them, when I decided to reveal the curtain and send a group of unedited pictures that included key identifiers, faces, and rooms. Oh Lord, how stuff went down. I only wish I had some way to see how they reacted. Friends who still lived there told me her brother moved in with his dad that week and that they no longer spoke. All in all, about 4 months till I got my revenge, but it was amazing. You gosh darn sons of B-words. Someone told my ex about it and now she finally knows for sure that it was me. Sucks for her now that I live 2,000 miles away for college, but peas and Christ, Reddit. Don't go shooting your mouth off. Okay, well, in the spirit of the post heading, this was truly effed up. Listeners, don't be like either of these people. Friend and I were fishing at a local creek when my friend's brother pulled up. Being the eggplant he normally was, he started throwing rocks in the creek to scare the fish, and then he threw my friend's bike in the creek. We were 13 at the time, and my friend was crying, and I felt so bad, I jumped into the creek and got his bike out, and told him we would get his brother back. About a month later, we were fishing again, and it was the dead of summer. I told my friend, today is the day we get his brother back. Caught a 2 to 3 pound carp, threw it on the side of the bank, and left it there until we were done fishing. At the end of the night, we went back to his place. His brother's car was sitting on the street. We took the carp, sliced it open, threw it under the driver's seat, and rolled his windows 3/4 up. The next morning when we woke up and left, I forgot about what we had done. Well, when I rode past JT's car, I noticed the window was kind of black, and then I took a closer look. It was covered in flies. I actually got scared because I did not expect a window to be caked with flies. By the time I got home, I was laughing in tears because his brother was always such an eggplant to us. Fast forward to baseball practice about 3 days later. Friend had a black eye but smiled at me when we made eye contact. His brother flipped out and ran into his house and punched him in the face. His mum flipped out on his brother. Brother was grounded for the rest of the summer. His mum said that my friend would never do such a thing, and he played along and acted as if he had no idea. Apparently the smell never really left the car. We nicknamed his brother the Lord of the Flies. A school bully repeatedly knocked a binder from my best friend's hands every single day while we walked down the hall. Now, we were in high school back in pre-Columbine era, so people didn't freak out as often when kids did effed up stuff. I convinced my friend to stick tacks through an entire side of his binder, turning it into an extremely dangerous spiked weapon, and just hold on extra tight while waiting for the bully to come to his thing. The bully lacerated his hand pretty badly. After he slammed his hand down on it, my friend held on and yanked back. Jackass didn't try that crap again. Not me, my brother. When my younger brother was about 3, my father had to look after him for the day. The plan was that he, after asking his boss, would take him into work for the day. It was office work and he was friendly with his boss, so my mum assumed it was no big deal. My father, however, didn't want a toddler distracting him all day, so he left him in the car with the radio on and a carton of apple juice. This is Britain, so it wouldn't overheat, but either way he was being a crappy dad. At the end of the day, he returned back to his car to drive home, expecting a sleeping toddler who wouldn't tell his mother a thing. Instead, upon his return, he found his son jumping up and down on the front seats to the radio on full blast, naked and laughing, slipping around covered in poop. He had soiled himself, removed his nappy, and rubbed his fecal matter everywhere. Poop was smeared all over the driver's seat, the windscreen, the steering wheel, the sat-nav, the driver's window, even hand-printed on the ceiling. Our dad didn't even know toddlers could produce the vast amount of turd present. The only car seat that was completely untouched was his own. In summary, my 3-year-old brother was abandoned in a car for 8 hours, later found smearing his own brand revenge paint all over my father's beloved BMW. One can only hope that the father in this story learned an important lesson in raising your gosh darn kids from this story. One time when I worked in a small video store as an assistant manager, there was this one customer who was being a real a-hole, to the point where I got fed up with his crap and threw him out. He had been a butthole to every single other employee in the store, including our boss. He was just a mouthy, harassing jerk. It would take way too long to go into the details. Anyway, I saw him in a little strip mall nearby one time, and he was bragging to some guys about how he was cheating on his workers' compensation. Then he pulls out this wad of cash and waves it under their noses like a Japanese fan. I got all this effing money for free from lying about my injured hand. What an a-hole. Anyway, if you go into the blue pages of the phone book, you'll find this listing in all caps letters that says Workers' Compensation Fraud Hotline. And take a wild guess what video stores keep in their records. Full name, home address, and phone number. Not only did I turn this guy in, but I was also able to provide great detail as to exactly how he was faking his injury, as he explained it to his 2 friends. I moved around a lot as a kid. Dad in the army, parents divorced, not staying in one place made long-term friendships impossible. But my situation attracted bullies like flies. I moved to a new school. A bully picked up my scent instantly, tripping and shoving, making fun of my clothes. Nothing too terrible, but I was already unhappy, so I felt miserable anyway. One day at school, I asked to use the restroom. I passed said bully on my way into the bathroom. He actually didn't do anything to me this time. When I entered the restroom, someone was in the only stall, crapping on the floor. I walked out of the bathroom, disgusted, ready to tell on them. I was 7 at the time. I was ready to re-enter my classroom when an incredible yet devious idea came to me. I went straight to my bully's classroom and walked inside. Everyone looked at me, which normally would have given me enough hesitation to turn 180 and go back to class. But that day, I didn't so much as pause. I walked up to the teacher's desk, pointed at my tormentor, and boldly proclaimed that he had crapped on the bathroom floor. My teacher's reaction was better than I could have expected. She made him follow her into the restroom while he cried and slobbered out, "I didn't do it! He's lying!" over and over again. She grabbed a wad of paper towel, handed it to him, and we watched as he picked it up and put it into the commode. She thanked me for telling her and told me to go back to my classroom. This happened about 20 years ago. I still look back at this moment as a turning point in my life, like I became me then. I used to live in a very small town, like 250 to 300 people. We had no stores, gas stations, etc. One day, a local guy decided to open up a little store that sold the basics like groceries and rented movies. He hired a few of us high school kids to work the store and promised us $50 a week for the summer to be paid at the end of the summer. We agreed and started working. We gave up a summer stocking shelves, cleaning the bathroom, lawn care, and whatever else. Well, the end of the summer comes around. It's our last day of work, and he comes in with our paychecks. $50 for each of us, for the whole summer. Needless to say, we weren't too happy, but his words were, Well, what the F are you gonna do about it? Drop off the key at my house since you won't need it anymore. We came up with a plan to pay this D-bag back. Before locking up the store for the last time, we left a window unlocked. We dropped the key off at the house. Around midnight, we were back at the store. Grabbed as much as we could. Cigarettes, money from the register, candy. Probably about 1,000 worth of stuff. Locked the window, then left through the emergency exit that had no alarm. There were also no cameras of any kind. Next day, there were cops there. He accused us all of doing it, but had no proof. He ended up having to shut down the store a few months later because the town heard how he didn't pay us and stopped doing business there. I don't feel bad. The F word deserved it. Thanks for tripling my comment karma. Figures it's about a crime I committed 15 years ago. Should have used a throwaway. This is yet another two wrongs don't make a right, but consider me on the side of the exploited worker, especially after the owner admitted with the "what are you gonna do" comment. I have one I'm about to do in a couple of days. See, my parents suck. I've been taking care of them for a while also going to school and whatnot, and still they're trying to cheat me, pawn my things, etc. But I've become fed up with them. I'm out of town at the moment, but when I get back, the next time they ask me to walk 2 miles to get them a pack of cigarettes, I will walk outside, around the house, have a friend with a van come, bring my pre-packed stuff out of the basement entrance, leave and stay at my friend's house for a few days until my train ticket is planned for, then move 2,000 miles across the country and live with another friend who just got me a job, rendering them worthless pillheads waiting for a pack of Pall Mall Menthol 100s for the rest of their sad lives. I covered his ceiling fan with glitter. Fear me, mother effers. From another post. When I was 7 or 8, I did a science project on the antibacterial efficacy of various soaps. Basically involved keeping hands dirty for a day, pressing grubby thumbs into petri dishes full of agar, then washing and doing the same thing again. I'd take tracings of the cultures. Bigger colonies were bad, smaller ones good. This ended up winning the county science fair for my grade in a large metropolitan area, so that was nice. But before that, after I'd finished the experiments but before I'd discarded the dishes, I got into a dispute with my parents. Don't remember what about. I thought, I'll show them. So I took the nastiest culture and swabbed it onto their bedroom doorknob. They both got sick as dogs, and I had to take care of them for a couple of days. Served me right. I waged bacteriological warfare against my parents using my science project, but I told them long ago and we laugh about it now. My past girlfriend cheated on me, and her roommate at the time had gotten to a point in their lease where they weren't super fond of each other and kept some distance. Her roommate was smoking hot, kind of annoying sometimes, and wasn't fond of my ex, so I decided to make a move on her. Best move ever. The look on my ex's face when her roommate walked me to the door in her undies after the first night was priceless. We proceeded to have hot, dirty, loud fun times almost nightly for 8 weeks, until their lease was up, and for a while after that. My ex even walked in on us in the living room once. Kind of makes me a jerk, but gosh darn was it fun, and there's no way I felt bad about it. In summary, my girlfriend cheated on me, I have loud, awesome adult fun times with her roommate until the lease is up. And so it came to pass that the highest voted thing I will ever post on Reddit was under a throwaway in a "What's the most effed up thing you've ever done" thread. Lol. Too late to the thread, but this is a good story. Everyone has worked with someone they've hated. I've never had a job where there wasn't someone who made my life miserable or whose very presence teed me off. Usually, you just have to put up with them, but every once in a great while, you can get even. Dave was a one-eyed Willie, stoop-shouldered, balding, in his 50s. Dave was a patronizing and irritating butthole. He had been at IBM his whole career, had been making good money, and hated contractors. He thought they were bad for the company, and that the only people worth a crap were regular employees, and he made it his priority to F with all of us. Nothing overt, but constant, subtle pressure was put on everyone whose badge said contractor on it. I think he developed this attitude from working with the guys from India, probably because they were so soft-spoken and accommodating, but maybe he was just a racist. I don't know, but whatever the reason, he took every opportunity to send us on little errands, wouldn't get back to us if we needed something, criticized anything we did, and generally made our lives heck in a way that couldn't be directly protested. I was pretty good friends with the guy sharing the room with him, another full-time employee, And one day, Robert called me up. War. We're going for coffee. Okay, let me just finish up a few things. You don't understand. We need coffee now. Right. I headed over to his office and he met me about halfway there. His eyes were shining with glee, but he wouldn't tell me what was going on until we had our coffee in the cafeteria. Once we finally had a table, he said, "Okay, Dave's a kink wrestler." Huh? He's a kink wrestler. Dude, I've got nothing. What the flip is a kink wrestler? It turned out that there were men who pay women to wrestle them into submission. Some of them did it as a sort of hobby, and others were extremely serious about it. Dave was one of the latter. Several times a year, he'd tell his wife that he was meeting up with old army buddies but went to kink wrestling conventions instead. They were highly organized, had rings set up for use, referees to score the matches, and everything. I'd never quite understand the need for refs, but hey, it's not my kink. There were web pages devoted to the women who were available to wrestle, and Dave's favorite was a woman named Red Robin. She was a tiny little woman who was an absolute beast, and he paid her thousands of dollars every time he'd go to one of these conventions for her to wrestle him for about 20 minutes per match. We went back to the office and pulled up Red Robin's website. Why does he pay this woman to wrestle him? She's ugly as heck. Do they do the deed after? He says no. Let me get this straight. Dave lies to his wife, flies out to California to have an ugly woman named Red Robin wrestle him into submission, pays her $400 per match, and doesn't bang her. Yep, bullcrap. I went on the main wrestling site and started reading Dave's posts, and there were a ton of them. He talked in great detail and depth about the sport, had invented his own move called the Twisted Ostrich, and told people about amazing matches he had won and lost. Look, I'm all about people's private lives remaining private, and I probably wouldn't have done anything if he hadn't so consistently been a POS to me the entire time. But he had, so game on. I registered a fake account under the name Suplex on the wrestling website and started corresponding with him. I started by asking him some technical questions about the Twisted Ostrich, but it wasn't long until he started asking me personal questions. As time went by, I fleshed out the character, so within about a month, he had become quite good friends with Miss Plex. I told him I was a late 20s, single lawyer living in DC. My marriage had ended because my husband just didn't understand my interest in such a harmless sport. It was so nice to talk to someone like him who really understood me. It was unbelievably satisfying. Every time he'd send me on some stupid errand, I'd think of how he was confessing his private life to the character I'd created. Oh, and he lied his ass off. He dropped a good 10 years and his wife somehow. Finally, he asked for a picture. Well, I'd already downloaded a whole set of a girl who looked about that age, and the photos didn't look professional. I started with a simple one, and he gushed about how hot I was. Over the next few weeks, I sent him more and more photos, each revealing more than the last, until the girl was fully nude, but didn't look posed. He started trying to be really sexy, and started talking about the best way to end a good wrestling match was by doing the deed. Hold the phones. He had told Robert that there wasn't any fun times at the matches. I probed a bit, and he finally admitted that he did the deed with the girls he wrestled. I effing knew it. They were ladies of the night working a special kind of crowd. It made more sense that he was spending $400 per match. I amped up the racy talk too, including wrestling into it. It was gold. He was hooked. His work slowed down, he became with Suplex, and quite frankly, my work suffered as well, having to answer all his notes. Fortunately, he didn't notice because he was too busy sending off love letters. Now it was driving me nuts, because here was this creepy 50-ish guy who was still giving me a daily ration of crap, but was secretly having an online affair with the character I'd created. Robert and I had a ton of fun effing with the poor guy, but one day he called me up again. War, coffee, now. At the cafeteria, he told me that Dave had another army reunion coming up, and we should see if we could get him to come to DC to meet Sue instead. Genius. I sent Dave an email and said we should get together sometime. Boom. In a flash, he responded that he had been thinking the same thing and had some time off in a few weeks. Would I be interested in him coming to visit? Yes, I would. As Sue, I arranged to meet him in DC at a local hotel. As the day approached, Dave became more and more excited and effed with us less and less. He still tried, but the conviction and heat wasn't there anymore. Robert and I were going nuts, having to act like nothing was going on while Dave prattled on about how happy he was to hook up with his old army buddies, what a fun trip it would be, how he was hoping he didn't get pinned down by the snow, etc. I guess he thought he was being clever, but since we already knew the entire story, it just came across as pathetic. He left early on a Friday to catch his flight, smiling like a champ. Tuesday morning, he showed up looking like his best friend had died. We asked him what was wrong, and he tried to play it off like he was just tired from his long weekend. But as soon as he could, he sent Sue a message asking what the heck had happened, and why hadn't she showed up. We waited to respond until after lunch. He was a basket case. Finally, we fired back a furious message that we'd called his house on Friday just to leave him a message, and some woman answered. We said we'd pretended to give her a survey, and we knew about his wife and 4 kids. So he had been lying to us all along. Basically, we went bat-crap crazy on him. We told him if he ever tried to contact us again, we'd tell his wife everything. We waited for him to get the email, watched him surreptitiously read it, and then we watched him have a meltdown. He started sweating like crazy, called his wife to check on her, and finally left early. He was never the same after that. He pretty much stopped messing with the contractors and kept to himself. We never sent him any more emails, and he never sent any to Sue. My contract ended not too long after that, and that was the last I heard of him. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Motorsag Manon gave me Reddit gold for this story. Thanks, man.
Parents with nanny cams. What have you caught your babysitter doing? This was my equivalent of pre-kindergarten. All the kids were regressing in their movement ability and getting really fat, so they set up spy equipment. Turns out one carer was doubling every baby's food portions and forcefully overfeeding them. Wish I had a nanny cam. My stepsister was watching my brother with disabilities for me. She would dump out the contents of his capsules meds and use them later. Didn't find out about it until he started having seizures constantly and ended up in the hospital for the 2nd time. This isn't a bad one. My parents caught the babysitter carrying our 60-pound golden retriever like he was a baby. We caught our maintenance guy spooning with our 130-pound mastiff on the floor. We encourage their love as best we can now. Once, at the very last moment when no other babysitter was available, I hired one that was sort of notorious for not being good. Not dangerous or anything, like leaving the child unattended, but like the type where she would not console the child if they were crying or punish them for doing small things. By the way, I was very suspicious, so I was continuously glancing at the baby cam. The babysitter was playing with him, singing songs, and completely engaging him well beyond the way you would expect somebody who was considered a bad babysitter to act. Essentially, what happened was the babysitter got hired by a crazy parent who didn't like her at all, so they spread a bunch of mumbo-jumbo through the neighborhood. When I came home, I gave her a very large tip, and she was the one I always hired whenever I needed a babysitter. I've been a pretty regular weekend nanny for an amazing family for 4 years now. They cycle through a different couple weekday nannies since I've been with them. There is only one monitor, and it's in the little dude's room. Once the mom showed me on the camera why they let one go. Little dude said, "Mommy said I don't have to do that." And the nanny snapped back, "Well, it doesn't matter. Mommy's a dog." And then dragged the kid out of the room by his shirt. Super fired. Not a nanny cam because this happened in the 90s, and I don't think we had them in Scotland then. But my mom came home early one day because she had become suspicious of our nanny as my sister and I never slept after a day with her. She found both my sister and I in bed in the middle of the day. Turned out my nanny had been dosing us up with child medicine to make us sleep all day so she could sit and do nothing. My mom put a nanny cam in my sister's bedroom. The only disturbing thing my mom allegedly saw was the babysitter crying while holding my sister. Turns out, the babysitter just had a miscarriage the day before. Well, a case which happened near where I live. Woman used to work, husband out of country. Had a 2-year-old kid. They hired a nanny to look after him during daytime. Day by day, kids started looking malnourished. So she set up a spy cam. Apparently, the lady used to bring her kid and feed him all the food left for the kid she was supposed to babysit. Then she would feed the kid cheap biscuits. She was promptly handed over to police. My story isn't that interesting, but I have a camera to check in on my rabbit when I'm not there. The biggest surprises were mostly just how almost nobody followed my pet sitting instructions. The one exception, ironically, was my brother who claimed to hate the rabbit and always wanted to get rid of it. I got an alert one day that my camera had detected movement while my bro was there taking care of him, and I decided to take a peek. I opened the app connected to the camera and saw my bro walk into my room, lay on my floor, and start playing with my rabbit. It just warmed my heart. We have cameras outside of our house. One day my neighbor told me that he saw my bunnies roaming the streets a few times. I didn't believe him, so I took a look. One time at work, I looked at the cameras and saw the gate slightly open, so I rewound the footage. I go to work super early, so I watched as my wife fed them, then got ready for work. The bunnies peeked around the side of the house and waited to see my wife's car leave. Then they pushed on the gate hard enough for the latch to set free. Then they left one by one. Later, before I got back home from work, they would make their way back and close the freaking gate. Smart little suckers. I never knew the gate latch was so weak, so I fixed that problem. A friend caught his nanny hitting their kid for interrupting that day's binge of the TV show Friends. I travel the US for work, and am fortunate enough to be able to bring my 2 beagles with me. They have never been away from my side longer than the time I've been at work. They are 10 and 13. I have a camera that I use to check in on them sometimes, mostly because my larger beagle is quite the ingenious guy. Opening doors, scooting chairs over places so he can jump up onto the counters, etc., etc. Last year I was in Oregon and had to go home to Michigan for an emergency. I do not fly with them, I will only drive. So I was in a pickle and reluctantly hired someone off of Rover that was willing to come stay over at my hotel room for 3 days. She was great. Kept up on texting me about the dogs, said things like tossing them a ball right now, so I would check in via the cam when I thought it was appropriate. This woman was amazing. Not only was she playing with them enough to make them exhausted, she was even teaching them new tricks, making them use their brains to solve puzzles, and even got my 42-pound beagle to get up on her back so she could do push-ups. She was an avid CrossFitter. I was extremely happy. A little late to the party, but here goes. My mom suspected our maid of stealing the silverware, and she's just freaking nosy. Anyway, the maid was indeed stealing the silverware. I think that ended up being overshadowed by my dad screwing her though. Not me, but my aunt's friend set up a nanny cam because she noticed that every time she changed her child's diaper, the child would start crying a lot more than usual. Turns out when they watched the nanny change her diaper, she would use Clorox wipes if they were nearby instead of grabbing the baby wipes. For anyone wondering what happened afterward, they fired the nanny immediately and the father became a stay-at-home dad. We have a security camera in my bedroom for my free roam bunny so we can keep an eye on her whilst we work, if we go on holiday, etc. Well, my dad is 50 and is a big bloke who acts like he doesn't like pets, came over to visit one day whilst I was out. He went in my room and crouched down calling the bunny. He spent an hour trying to pet the rabbit and kept repeating in a soft voice, "I'm not gonna hurt you. I just want to pet you and see how fluffy you are." He just about crapped himself when I spoke through the security camera to tell him she's very fluffy. My family bought one to see our dogs when we leave on vacation twice a year. It's one where they can hear us and we thought it'd be great. We hardly used it. We also asked our maid to dog sit for us while we were out. Once when we looked at the feed, we saw the dog sitter there a solid 30 minutes early just petting the dogs and playing with them. She's since retired from working, but she was the sweetest old lady and we love her. Another time, my dad left a wad of cash on top of the washing machine, about $600, and she put a rubber band around it with a note saying he misplaced it. I was a nanny for a family for over 10 years. I moved 8 hours away, but sometimes I drive up to stay with them if they need me for a weekend. I miss the kids so much. I also babysat and house cleaned all through high school and college. I pride myself on never stealing a thing and never having laid a hand on a child. I'd rather maintain a great relationship and have guaranteed client base for years to come instead of a $20 object to pawn. Most they'd see me do on a nanny cam was picking my nose. This is a bit of a tangent, but has anybody ever seen the show Nanny 911? I remember when that show used to come on a few years ago, and it just blew my mind how irresponsible some of these parents were. And that's not even including how crazy the kids would get sometimes. We once caught the nanny putting charcoal to feed them as a snack. This woman claimed that she thought it was a snack. It was in a charcoal box. My brothers were 4. Chasing my cats around with a broom, hitting them. She's since been fired. From a cannon, I hope. My grandpa was staying with my parents, but they figured it best to hire the regular sitter to watch my younger siblings overnight since they didn't think my grandpa was up to the task, and they were attending a wedding a couple hours away and made plans to spend the night in a hotel nearby. They had set up a nanny cam in a couple rooms, my siblings' bedroom, the master bedroom, living room, and kitchen, all motion activated. They normally wouldn't bother looking through the footage if everything seemed fine upon returning home and their master bedroom cam had never been triggered before. When they returned, they noticed that the cam in the master bedroom had been triggered, so they decided to take a look, cut to footage of my grandpa and the sitter both naked, aggressively making out from the entrance of the room, staggering while intertwined towards the bed, and then about 20 minutes of banging on my parents' bed. The sitter was about 20 years old and my grandpa was around 70 at the time. My dad called me immediately after he saw the footage, laughing his butt off, and I could hear my mom crying in the background, completely mortified from what she had just witnessed, and shouting at my dad to throw out the sheets and kick out grandpa. My mom called the sitter to confront her, and she just apologized and said there was connection or some crap to that matter. When she asked my grandpa what he was thinking, he just said, "At my age, you must seize every opportunity." I wish there was audio for the build-up. I lay awake at night sometimes, just wondering what kind of game my grandpa was talking to get in that sitter's pants. I was the kiddo. My mom often tells the story of how she watched me give a big ol' hug to my babysitter who just broke down out of nowhere after serving me lunch. Turns out her dad had died a month back and it just wasn't a good day for her. I still remember you, Miss Yancey. I hope you're doing just fine now. The couple I sat for had a nanny cam in their living room, the kind that went in teddy bears. They got me on video giving their 2-year-old the Heimlich after he tried to eat a rock. We have a nanny cam and we caught our nanny dancing with our baby, making him laugh and giving him kisses. She's the best, and the cameras give us the peace of mind to know she really treats him like her own. I pay my neighbor to feed the stray cats in my garden when I'm away for days at a time, and the camera caught my neighbor trying to come in by pole vaulting one time. He nailed it amazingly. I got a nanny cam to keep an eye out for my elderly grandfather, especially when the home aides were there. My grandfather started asking for lots of cash and couldn't remember what was happening to it. A brooch that my aunt was supposed to get disappeared, and then I heard reports of my grandfather being inappropriate with some of the home health aides. He was busted, squirreling away his medication that he was supposed to be taking in his chair, giving money to an aide, and inappropriately harassing another aide. We didn't have a nanny cam, but my mom set up the camcorder when she suspected her babysitter was stealing, and then caught the babysitter stealing. She returned most of the stuff and my mom threatened to report her to the police. I think she should still have reported her anyway. Now she probably just went on stealing at other people's places. The family I nanny for told me that their previous nanny got caught doing loads of awful things. The couple that outraged me most were 1, leaving their 3-year-old daughter in the tub with water up to her chest for 2 hours every day while she sat in another room unable to see said child. And 2, once she went to run an errand with the same kid, and their doorbell camera caught her putting the kid in the car seat, not buckling her, and peeling off. My mom said you could see the toddler trying to buckle herself in before they took off. Edit. Number 1. The camera was not in the bathroom. It was where they were able to see where the nanny was, room near bathroom, and their kid if the door was left open, which it always was while she was bathing. Number 2, they thought she was a perfectly good nanny until their kid was saying weird things that were going on, and they decided to watch the footage. They fired her after seeing what she was doing, and that's where I, Super Nanny, came in. The cameras weren't actually for the nanny. They were for the kid's therapist because she was prone to violent behavior and they were trying to fix it. My aunt has a nanny cam and found my older cousin's babysitter playing blackjack with him. She lost $50. I've caught her making pillow forts that are heavily resistant to the monsters that may or may not come out during heavy thunderstorms with my kiddo, 20 minutes after bedtime. Needless to say, she was dealt with appropriately. I'm not a parent, rather the child, and I had this nanny, or Yaya as we would call it. It became useless because she soon found out and kept unplugging the camera. It turns out she was slowly stealing money from the family. We fired her. I was the child, and there weren't any nanny cams, but my parents had left a small bucket of toys and things to keep me busy, and they hired a babysitter to watch me while they both had to take overtime at work and knew they would be gone most of the day. The babysitter moved that bucket of toys to another room, put me in a crib, and proceeded to go off and read or something and left me there for hours with nothing to do, only coming back to check on me or feed me. My parents came back to me just sadly sitting in my crib. Indoor cameras hooked up to the same unit as the outdoor cams. Husband was walking to his study, saw a giant huntsman spider, Australian here, and screamed like a little girl and jumped away. Needless to say, I bolted to the computer to watch the playback on repeat for a few minutes. I laughed so hard I had an asthma attack. She stole a single puzzle piece of what we were trying to solve. Saw her put it in her pocket. Final straw was one of our freaking potted plants. Who goes out of their way to steal a potted plant? Hello? I'm glad I stopped babysitting before cameras became a thing. A couple I sat for had adorable kids, but the dad had one room in the house devoted to a full model railroad setup. Dozens of trains, bridges, teeny villages, the works. After they went to bed, and during that long, boring stretch before the parents came home, I just played with the train set. Only regret is that I couldn't toot the horns because the kids would have busted me. Not a parent and not a nanny cam, then why are you commenting on this post? But my uncle once set up a wildlife camera, the ones that hunters use, to get a photo of something happened in my great-grandmother's apartment. She was very demented, so she told us incoherent stories about how there were people there stealing all of her liquor and chocolates. Turns out, she was the one who stole the goodies, but we also found out her other son, my other uncle who no one has contact with due to his shady actions with his wife, had a key to the apartment and was regularly visiting at midnight to steal some jewelry. Friends of ours don't have kids, but have dogs. They were going out of town and told the dog sitter about all the cameras, including the one that is outside, but sometimes picks up reflections and will actively notify them of motion. The dog sitter seemed to get it, but she forgot to convey that to her boyfriend, who came out and walked around naked quite a bit. I was the one caught in the camera a few times. Number 1. A family who had bunnies caught me on camera booping noses to the beat of the song I was singing. Little bunny Fufu hopping around the kitchen, picking up all the lettuce and munchy munch munch. Number 2. A different family saw me get freaking tackled by their 95-pound Mastiff puppy, and they immediately called me to make sure I didn't have a concussion since I just kinda laid there for a while. I was fine. I just got the wind knocked out of me. Number 3. Yet another different family saw me reading a book to their kids and later complimented all the voices I make. I had no idea they could hear audio and I got so embarrassed since I really did go all out. When I was around 12 years old, my parents caught my babysitter on camera stealing my NES games and shoving them into her pants and shirt. They confronted her about it and she kept denying it until Ninja Gaiden fell out of her pant leg. My mom took her into a room and made her take out all the games she stole. She literally had games shoved under the strap of her bra on her back so that she could sneak them out of the house, and others were put inside the waistband of her underwear. She must have really thought about this for a while. Anyway, we got the games back and she was sent home without pay. I dog sit for some neighbors, one of which told me she has a camera in the living room/dining room for her dogs. You know those ones that dispense treats? Anyways, I thought it was a strange essential oil diffuser until she told me what it was. I was being paid to play with them for an hour, but she found out that I was actually staying for 2 or 3 hours. When she asked me about it, I think I said something like, I'd want someone to do the same for my dog. Ever since then, she leaves me treats in the kitchen and even got me a Christmas present from the dogs. She picked up our pug Doogie and was dancing around the living room with him while that Carly Rae Jepsen song was playing. My uncle told me this once when a babysitter was holding his daughter, my older cousin, when she was a baby. The baby was playing with the toys, and she somehow swallowed a small piece of something, and the babysitter performed the Heimlich but for babies. She saved my cousin, and her family was thankful. They have no idea where the babysitter is now, but right now she's supposed to be around her late 40s. Edit. I asked my uncle about this, and apparently they know where the babysitter is. She's in California, and she is a very well-paid doctor and makes over $310,000 a year as a physician. That's the only thing he knows since she left. Not a nanny cam, but the baby monitor managed to catch our then 1.5-month-old projectile vomiting on me, and then straight up into the mouth and on the face of my husband 2 minutes later. When she put my daughter down for a nap, she took a nap on the bed next to her. This is just so cute. Caught the babysitter rubbing one out on our couch. The babysitter was/still is my female cousin. I figured the best thing was to just say nothing, save the awkwardness. She did it a fair amount. I then mentioned our house cam by accident some months later and her face dropped. I realized what I'd said, then casually threw in that I never checked it, again, to save the awkwardness. A colleague of mine saw that when his 8-month-old baby cried, the nanny just ignored him and kept watching reality TV, not paying any attention to him while he bawled his eyes out. She did not attempt to console him or anything. She just tried to hear the TV. There were a few other troubling instances too, like she'd say they went on a brief stroll but disappeared for hours with no explanation, or she didn't follow the parents' instructions on how to put him to sleep and let him cry, and my colleague realized that the baby was anxious and desperate every time the nanny arrived. Heartbreaking, really. Not a nanny cam, but a vid. My sister-in-law sat the camera down thinking she turned it off. I have over an hour of her teasing my toddler in a mean way with candy and popsicles. She started telling him that he would get some, then hold it just out of reach. She then ate it in front of him, making mm-mm sounds. She was also calling him mean and weird names like Turd Muncher and Ricky Stupido. The camera got all the audio, but only some video. At the end of the video is when we got home. When I confronted her with the video, she started claiming I doctored it, that I was a liar, a jerkwad, and hated her because she was prettier than my wife. She is not. That was the last time she was allowed around either of our kids unsupervised. She was the sister-in-law for 10-ish years and is now the crazy Karen ex-sister-in-law. I can't have her presence on social media because she attacks me all the time and says lies. I'm also estranged from my brother because of her. 10 years of her warped his perception of our family. He still thinks some of the whacked-out things she accused our dad, sister, other brother, and various other family members of were true. No reasoning has convinced him of the truth, not even the thought that if video evidence refutes some of the claims, then all can be considered suspect. I may get comments and advice of what I could do, but in the end, you can't fight crazy, and sometimes life is just not fair. The only thing I have done to make things better is ignore her. She eventually just starts attacking someone else, like an annoying yipping dog that just needs to annoy. As for my brother, I hope time will help to fix things. I also think that he might just be more like her than I think. Birds of a feather fly together. Oh man, this next one is actually so wrong and so messed up. Sitting on our couch playing with the dogs like we paid them to. I have a nanny cam for the purpose of creeping my dog while I'm at work, but it's how I discovered my former superintendent was coming into my apartment randomly to steal a nug from my jar of red eye. Friend caught hers rummaging through her closet and stealing a blouse. She confronted her about it when she returned home, and the woman played innocent. She was wearing the freaking blouse. Remember that post from before, you can't fight crazy? Yeah, I think that applies here. We hired a dog sitter over the Thanksgiving holidays to check on the pooch, feed the cats, get the mail, etc. Edit, definitely pointed out the various security cams to her. She asked if she could bring her sister along for company. We said sure, no problem. The sister, we found out in conversation, attends a nearby hyper-conservative fundamentalist school. When the hired sitter took the dog out and the fundy sister had the house to herself, she took the opportunity to scream, "Frick!" at the top of her lungs a few times. Not a lot else. Just paced around the living room dropping high-decibel F-bombs. Gotta find some way to vent that fundy angst. Watched her outside playing with my dogs. She was dog-sitting. Our yellow Labrador and golden retriever puppies started munching the blueberries right off our blueberry bushes. They know dang well they're not supposed to get into the blueberry patch. We watched our dog sitter run over to them to try to get them to stop. She then ran outside and ran back out with the bowl. She proceeded to race the dogs for the blueberries. Had to be one of the highlights of our trip. We came home to a bowl of blueberries in the fridge and 2 very guilty puppers. My friend is a nanny, and sometimes she takes the small human she watches and has her dance for the parents randomly in front of the camera or wave since it is a Google Hub and has photos of the parents. Small gifts for the parents to find if they review the video from that day. Not my kids, but my sister's. This was when my nephew was still very young and my sister was still breastfeeding. Long story short, my sister caught the babysitter drinking her breast milk. She had her suspicions because my nephew would go through twice as much milk when the babysitter was taking care of him. My sister set up the camera and caught the guy in the act. Apparently the guy was some sort of fitness nut and had read that breast milk could be very beneficial. As weird as it sounds, my sister ended up working out a deal with the guy. She got him to drop the price of watching the kid in exchange for a bit of breast milk every now and again. I have cameras all over the inside and outside of my house. It came standard with the Ring doorbell. Next came critter cams I put near my bird feeders, then cameras everywhere. I used them mostly to look for the wild bunnies in my yard and to see the owl leave its roost at night. The indoor cameras are dog cameras. My wife and I use them to view and talk to our dogs while at work. The weirdest thing I've caught my dog doing? I made a batch of jerky, put it in a large Ziploc bag, and placed it in the dining room table in preparation for a camping trip. My 19-pound Shih Tzu, which is large for a Tzu, was caught on video moving a dining room chair, jumping up onto it, then jumping onto the table. He ate the entire bag of jerky, leaving only the bag. He did this in less than 10 minutes. My babysitter took the kids out of the house and claimed she went to the park. Turns out she took them to a friend's house without car seats. I'm a nanny, and it is in my contract that all cameras must be disclosed. Any undisclosed camera I find will immediately void the contract. That being said, if I get thrown up on, pooped on, painted on, food on, whatever on me, I need to know what is a safe area to change so that my bosses don't get a show they aren't paying for. People opposed to this are not people I work for. One of my exes and her mom had to leave town for a week and they had 3 cats. One only had 3 legs because he got hit by a car, poor timid little thing that hid all the time and refused to come out, and a dog that had diabetes. They hired someone just to come over once in the morning and once at night to feed, let the dog out and give the dog his medicine. They had cams, I'm not sure why they put them in place, and found that the guy stayed there all day just playing with the animals and even got the timid cat to come out and cuddle with him. They showed me the videos of him arriving and all of their pets rushing to the door to meet him. I house/dog sit for friends of my parents. The first time I did it, they mentioned they had a security camera by the front door that was motion activated, and I didn't really think anything of it. They were gone for a few weeks, they come home, their 2 giant huskies are happy, I get paid, and all was well. A couple weeks later, my mom calls me laughing and laughing. My parents had dinner with the friends I dog sit for, and they showed a video to my parents from the front door cam. Apparently, all it showed was me sprinting full speed down the hallway, a dog toy in hand, biggest stupid grin on my face, followed by the 2 huskies running and sliding after me, followed by me, followed by the huskies, over and over and over and over again. I sit for them as often as I can. Not a nanny cam, but a camera in my sister's room when she was a toddler. She had a habit of getting out of her toddler bed, so me, my dad, and my mom would watch it, and every time she got up, we'd all say, "Go back to bed, Serena." It was funny to see her reaction. I was the babysitter. I used to look after the daughter of a couple who played tennis with my uncle. They were super rich and went out all the time. The kid would go to bed at about 7, then I would sneak a bit of booze from their well-stocked bar. I wouldn't drink it on the job, but I'd pour it into my water bottle to take to my next party. It happened on and off for about 3 years. Then one night, they must have changed their security system or something, and I got busted. They were very chill about it, seeing as I clearly didn't drink it while watching their kid, but told me they could get in trouble for supplying.
What's the dumbest thing you've ever witnessed someone get offended by? I had a lady very offended because I would not let her hold my few days old baby. This was a complete stranger at the grocery store. On my whiteboard at work, I'd written the slogan, No matter what happens, someone will find a way to take it too seriously. After about a week, someone from HR came by and asked me to remove it because they had received a complaint. The irony was worth it. A lady started yelling at the cashier and tried to jump over the counter for checking the $100 bill she paid with. Wouldn't you say that this is a good reason to be even more suspicious of somebody? Years ago, a woman came into my work and brought a black stove. The guys take the box up there to her and she flips the F out because the box said Negro on it. Everyone tried explaining to her that it was the Spanish word for black, but she left there saying we were all racists. Politicians in the UK wanted to ban the term brainstorm because it could offend people with epilepsy. At a restaurant years ago, and this guy ordered a soup. He pulled a bay leaf out of the soup and went freaking mental. "There's a leaf in my soup!" and was convinced that it was off the tree outside. Manager continued to explain that it was a bay leaf, an ingredient for flavor, and this guy wasn't having it. Since then, anytime my wife cooks a soup, we treat the leaf like the bean in a cake, and whoever finds it gets a free rein over being super grumpy, as long as it's in a jest. I used to frequent a drive-thru near my job on my lunch breaks. After they repeated my order and told me to pull forward, I always said, "Thanks," before I drove to the window. One day the manager comes to the window and says, "Hey, I'm going to tell you something. Every time you come here and you say thanks, it just sounds really rude. Thanks is just something you say with your buddies. Here, you say thank you because you just sound really rude." Have not been back there since, and I immediately reported him to corporate when I got home. I had a drama teacher get mad at me for pretending to be a werewolf in a skit. She claimed it was disrespectful of transgenders, which I suppose means that transgenders are werewolves to her. I had a stranger get upset because I covered my ears when emergency vehicles went by. He said I was showing disrespect or something. F that. Those sirens are loud. "Hey, F you, man. Those sirens felt terrible because of you. They went home crying that night. I hope you're proud of yourself." The idea of an emergency vehicle driver bursting into tears at the thought of the song of their vehicles being unappreciated is funny on a truly weird level to me. I used to live with a black guy from the UK. One night we went out to a local bar and started talking to some random people. A random white woman got upset when I called my roommate black during a discussion about something. The correct term is African American. According to her, even the Brits are African American. There was a big uproar in DC some years back where an official called a budget term niggardly and ended up having to resign because the hate speech police can't use dictionaries. Somebody once complained at my restaurant that their Swiss cheese didn't have enough holes in it. "Why would you complain that you were getting more cheese than you were supposed to?" I've met people who have been offended by me not allowing them to pet a dog that has syringomyelia, neurological/spinal disorder, which causes immense pain if touched during episodes. I explained to them that this dog, a cavalier, can get aggressive and snappy if he has an episode, and it's not something that we can detect easily. They told me that I shouldn't be walking an aggressive dog, as it may bite someone who wants to pat it. Schools suspending, or worse, a child for chewing a Pop-Tart into the shape of a handgun. Or the deaf kid named Hunter, who was suspended because his sign language form of Hunter looked like a gun. Googled and verified. This has actually happened before, folks. As a server, I once ran food out to a table with a young, less than 6-month-old baby, dressed in generic brown baby clothing. I put the plates down in order, and when I got to the baby, I asked the mother, "Did she get anything?" She glares at me with one of the most teed-off faces I've ever seen and snarls, "He's a boy." So I did the most logical thing I could think of, shrugged, said, "Whoops," and left. I have a friend with her first baby that is 6 months old. Every single piece of clothing this kid has is a neutral color, no pink or blue. Just last week, she posted a big rant on Facebook about people constantly getting her child's gender wrong. People need to pay better attention. It's very clear that Lexi is a girl. Of course, all of her friends made comments backing her up, and not one pointing out that no one can tell the gender of a 6-month-old without normal cues. Whoopsie! I really should have used a throwaway for this post. This information made it back to the parents, and boy were they not happy I was talking about them anonymously on the internet. I was once talking about how I visited the Grand Tetons and talked a little about the geology since I found it very interesting. One of the people I was eating lunch with was very offended I suggested something might have happened 2 million years ago. I work with a guy who doesn't believe that dinosaurs ever existed and that all the fossils that have ever been discovered are a hoax by archaeologists. This person is an adult, seemingly, human, with a college education. We just don't talk about dinosaurs when he's around. I understand that paleontologists, not archaeologists, would be the ones to discover dinosaur fossils. Here is an excerpt from today's edition of Riling Up Robbie with Dinosaurs. Me. Hey Robbie, who are those guys running around burying fake dinosaur bones again? Robbie. Flipping archaeologists, man. It's a goddamn conspiracy. The government pays them by the pound for the fossils they find, so every year they make them a little heavier and blame it on carbon dating. I couldn't make this trash up if I tried. This is a true story. My dad was at work and witnessed a guy hold a door for a woman, just to be polite. He smiled at her and waited. As she got to the door, she said, "Why did you hold the door? Because I'm a woman and I can't myself?" To which the guy replied, no, I just, He didn't really know what to say and fumbled out a weird apology. The woman just made more snide comments and walked through the door and went on her way. My dad and him had a laugh about it, wondered why someone would be so strange and thought nothing more of it. The next day, this guy gets called into his manager's office and is told he is being accused of being sexist and harassment in the workplace. This guy had to go on a 2-day course on dignity and diversity in the workplace because he held a silly door open for some ungrateful person. As someone who's been alternately shouted at for being condescending when I tried to give up my seat for an older person, and for being disrespectful when I didn't stand up, I feel this man's confusion at traditional norms. I guess I offended someone at my work because I insulted their intelligence. I run audio at conferences, and the presenter kept turning away from his microphone. In the middle of his presentation, he asks me what's wrong with the mic. I tell him, "There's nothing wrong with it, just be sure you speak into it." Then he got on me afterwards, saying, "Don't tell me how to do my job." It's always around the holiday when someone gets offended for another person wishing them happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever. The person meant no ill will. They could have easily said nothing, yet someone always takes it like a personal assault on their beliefs. It makes me so angry because of how irrational it is. I always get irritated by white people who get themselves into a lather on behalf of other people of other races over some innocent blunder by another white person, particularly if the people of the other races don't seem much bothered by it. Around 1993 or so, when my kids were just small and the family was all going to church, Baptist, we were all at a social and my daughter was wearing some little girl clothing from Osh Kosh Bagosh, and this one really snooty guy from Sunday school said he would never allow his kids to wear something so offensive, as he considers Bagosh to be taking the Lord's name in vain. I was so taken back by his statement and attitude that I didn't say anything, but in reality he was just trying to prove how super spiritual he was. I finally realized that I didn't have much in common with these people and stopped going. I had a similar one over Christmas with my dad, and a real stretch of the imagination. He was horribly offended by the Happy Honda Days commercial, not because they're idiotic, but because, and I'm trying to quote here, holidays clearly means Christmas, and it's a foreign car. That's really offensive. I think I responded something like, "So Christmas is the only holiday, it's distinctly an American holiday, despite the fact that Jesus predated this country by 776 years, therefore a car that's built in Ohio and Alabama can't put their name in the word holiday." I may have added that he's going around looking for things to be offended by, he could probably do better, but it deteriorated from there. Christmas with the family. Brazil got so offended by the Simpsons episode about the country that the Ministry of Culture tried to censor it. You know, it's a good episode of something when an entire country gets butthead over it. I believe there was a similar, if lesser outrage around the episode with Australia, i.e. one of the funniest episodes. I worked at an AOL call center the day after the 2004 Super Bowl. You know, the one where Janet Jackson's breast made its appearance, and because AOL sponsored the halftime show, thousands of people called in to either cancel their accounts and, I crap you not, called to say that they would never sign up for AOL because of that breast. People would bafflingly wait up to 3 hours in the call queue just to say that even though they didn't have AOL, that exposed bit of chest cemented their resolve to never sign up. It was one of the worst days to ever work there. Worse than September 11th. It was that day that I realized how foolish and petty people can be about one single African-American breast. A guy friend dressed up as post-Vietnam, wheelchair-bound Lieutenant Dan, and his girlfriend dressed up like Forrest Gump for a Halloween costume contest at our local bar. They won, but not before a drunk girl had to yell at my friend that his costume was offensive to people in wheelchairs. This story would be perfect if your friend was actually disabled. Eating at a locally owned, family-run, authentic Vietnamese restaurant. A roommate's boyfriend, who I've posted about several times, he is basically the epitome of white male, Tumblr, SJW, accused me of culturally appropriating their food and forcing them to cater to me because I am white. When I pointed out that as a kid my neighborhood had suddenly had a large influx of Vietnamese immigrants and I knew the family personally and have been going to their restaurant for years, even bringing every guest/couch surfer to the place, he tells me, "They don't make the restaurant for white people. Stop smothering them with your privilege." This guy went from a broke-as-F Vietnamese immigrant to having an insanely popular restaurant. People drive from the other side of the city, 45 minutes, to eat there. And 13 years after opening, there is always a wait no matter what time or day you go. And was able to pay for his 3 children's college tuition. I think he likes the universal popularity. Visiting New York while studying English in Boston for the summer in 2003. I was sitting in a bar with other Spanish classmates as we were planning what to see and where to go in the city. We are speaking Spanish between us, but with a Castilian accent and speaking really fast. A guy in an expensive suit stops at our table after paying his takeout meal and asks us very friendly, "Where are you from, guys?" We smile and say proudly, "Spain." His face suddenly changes to an angry expression. He flips us the bird and says, "Get out of my country, mother flippers," and then left. I'm Belgian and have a Dubliner accented English because I lived there. In New York, I was chatting with a lady while waiting for the underground. I was trying to get to a Yankee stadium. When this girl asks me if I'm Irish, I say, "No, I'm Belgian," and she throws a tantrum that she was Irish-American and I should not pretend to be someone else by copying an accent. Apparently, I had to speak with a Belgian accent so she wouldn't be confused. Also, I'm probably more Irish than she is. I have a friend who is allergic to gluten. If you ask her about it, she gets super offended. Naturally, we used to like to ask her what her diet has to consist of. We all used to eat dinner together and it would just come up in conversation from time to time. Everything seemed just fine. Then we found out from her roommate that she would come back super teed off that we asked her questions. We had no clue. We just wanted to know and were curious about how many things out there have gluten in them. Gosh, that girl is awful. When I was a cashier at Borders, I had one lady get offended because I called her by a man's name. The stupid thing was that she was picking up a book her husband had shipped to the store, and his name was on the order. Ooh, I have one. In college, I saw a guy from class on the bus. We started talking a bit. He starts to tell me about his big plans with Maria. Maria this and Maria that. I have no idea who Maria is. So I am thinking and thinking. Then I remember seeing him being friendly with someone in our class. So I said, "Oh, that girl in our class." And he looked at me with a dead-eye stare and said, "Maria is not that girl. She has a name, and her name is Maria." He was offended that I wasn't respecting her personhood enough because I called her that girl. He then stopped talking to me. I was commuting from Albany, New York to Brooklyn for a little while, and I would drive past a town called Fishkill, New York. I stopped there once to get gas, and at the gas station there was a bunch of people, much more than normal for a small town. I heard them talking about how they were from PETA, and there was a protest in the town, because it was called Fishkill. I saw one of the protesters get in an argument with a townie, and then heard the townie say, "Kill is Dutch for creek, you butthole." To this day, the funniest thing I have ever witnessed. I was in a loud bar with a bunch of friends, and there were a few F-words being thrown around. The table right behind us asked the waitress if she could kick us out for being the most offensive group of individuals. For several years, I taught a summer school class in filmmaking to elementary schoolers, who can be a very sensitive bunch. 2 stories. We were discussing an action scene from Firefly, and I identified Zoe as the black woman. A couple kids gasped, "That's racist," one volunteered. "She's African American." I told them that black was not a racist thing to call people, and that Zoe would not in fact be African American because she wasn't from America, she was from space. One of the kids had pitched a movie about the Civil War, and in the discussion the KKK came up. Not everyone had heard of them, so I described them as a club for mean, angry people. They hate people for being different, like they hate black people. One of the boys jumped out of his chair. Mr. Lukebin said something racist. He was trembling with righteous indignation. I didn't say I hate black people, I told him. I said they hate black people. I'm not a member of the KKK. That didn't satisfy him, so I ended up having to go with, look, I'm Jewish. They hate me too. And that calmed him down. I was standing at a bus stop with another lady. She was yelling on her phone and I was watching a movie on mine. We had both just missed the previous bus and had to wait another 25 minutes or so for the next one. Given her rather unstable condition, she was very upset at something. I tried to blend into my surroundings as to the best of my abilities. I didn't last too long. She said something rather outrageous along the lines of how her boyfriend cheated on her with someone. Being stunned, I lacked the restraint to not look at her. Unfortunately, we made eye contact, and that's where it all went downhill. For the next 20 minutes, she yelled at me, thinking that I was the hussy that corrupted him. She ended every sentence with white-hooded B-word, as I was wearing a white Eskimo-like jacket with the hood up. Apparently, she also thought that I grew up in a place called Red Deer, Alberta. I had to Google it afterwards, and that I had slept with hundreds of guys. FYI, I have only ever dated or done the deed with a single person, so you get just how stunned I was at these comments. I didn't say a single thing to her during this entire 20-minute episode, and only talked when I had to convince other bus patrons that I had never met this woman before. In summary, I'm a white-hooded B-word from Alberta who slept with every man in town. Forgot to mention I saw her again the other day. She didn't notice me, thankfully, but she had been ranting to some other poor soul about her experiences. Back in '99 or so, a small group of us made the pilgrimage to Memphis to spend the weekend eating ribs and touring Graceland. During a taxi ride from Beale back to our crappy motel, barreling down 240 at least 90 miles per hour, the taxi driver is completely turned around facing us in the back seat. He has sock puppets on both his hands, knees on the wheel. As we scream and white-knuckle everything we can hold on to, the sock puppet tells us racist jokes that are so horrible, even Reddit would be offended. He swerved from lane to lane and scared the crap out of all of us. It's a miracle we didn't die. The offense. Years later, I was the best man at the wedding of one of the fellow riders in that cab. In referencing all the exciting adventures we had had together, I alluded to the racist puppet show in my best man speech. A friend of the bride who was in an interracial marriage stood up, berated me for being a racist a-hole, took her gift back from the gift table, and left. Talk about a tense crowd for the rest of that speech. I was able to play it off and finish the last half of what I had to say. Everyone else thought it was a nice speech. To be clear, I didn't tell the story. I didn't repeat any of the jokes. All I did was list a series of unrelated, yet noteworthy events that occurred during my years of friendship with the groom. It was later explained to me that this girl loved playing the race card since she was a white girl married to a black guy. When the husband, who returned to the wedding with the gift about an hour later, explained to her that nothing racist was said, only that the word racist had been used as an adjective, she was too embarrassed to come back. All she heard was the word racist, and then her instincts kicked in. A couple of years ago in a middle school art class, I saw the teacher literally scream at a student just because she said, "Oh my God." She shrieked, "Don't you dare use the Lord's name in vain in my classroom." Then he got sent out of the room because he laughed at her overreaction. Got another one. Offended over me being single. Worked in an office, and all the girls were either married or in serious relationships. At the time, I was 20, nearing 21, and very much enjoying my single life. The stuff that would come out of these women's mouths when I mentioned going out with my friends or the dating scene was pretty appalling. I always wondered why they didn't dump their boyfriends or get a divorce if they were so flipping miserable being tied down. The discrimination was pretty ridiculous too. Can't tell you how many times I was denied having a day off over some other girl because, "You don't have a boyfriend/husband. What do you have to do that's so important?" My cousin and his friend were waiting in line at the movie theater to see Titanic back in college. They're joking around and say something like, "I wonder what happens at the end of the movie. Oh, I heard the boat sinks and everyone dies." The lady in front of them in line was furious and turned around and yelled at them for spoiling the end of the movie.
What is the creepiest glitch in the Matrix you've experienced? I mentioned this in another thread, but here it is again. Me and my friend were at a Chinese restaurant and we ordered a General Tso chicken dinner and shrimp lo mein dish. When we sat down, we took out both boxes and set them on the table about 2 feet apart. My friend opens the first box and we see a shrimp lo mein dish. It has all the things in there. Noodles, shrimp, fried rice. He closes the box and opens the other box. Inside that box is another shrimp lo mein dish, shrimp, noodles, fried rice. Oh, I think, they must have mixed the order. I was just about to say this when my friend says out loud, looks like they made a mistake and gave us two, as he opens up the first box again. Inside of it is a General Tso chicken dinner order, General Tso chicken, white rice, and an egg roll. He froze and looked at me. I looked back at him, and we sat in silence. It took us 5 or so minutes to collect ourselves. I have no idea what the frick happened. Not creepy, but so vivid and distinct that I still think about it years later. I had a, subjectively, long, involved dream where I was a vendor at a fish market. I remember getting up early, dressing, doing a whole morning routine, going to get tea, heading out to the docks, buying fish, loading them in a cart and going to get ice, then haggling for ice, buying some less fresh fish while I was at it, then going to a market to my stall, setting up and selling fish all day. It was so real. I talked to friends, smoked nasty cigarettes, haggled customers, ate lunch, had tea, and just lived through the day. At the end of the day, I cleaned up, counted my cash, paid the stall rent, went home, cooked some of the fish I hadn't sold, along with some veggies and rice that I traded for. I drank more tea, relaxed for a while, then drew a hot bath, soaked and smoked some more cigs, then went to bed. The next morning, I woke up refreshed, ready to go down to the docks to buy fresh catch. Except I was in my house, next to my wife, truck parked outside, and it was Saturday. No work. My wife and I were getting geared up to go skiing in Oregon and the car was already packed. Weird thing was, in the dream, I was single and a smoker. I'm not. And the whole long dream had been in fluent Chinese. The effortless kind of fluency that only comes from a lifetime of speaking it. Oh, and I had been Chinese. I'm a big, hairy white dude, somewhat fluent in Spanish, and I know a little bit of Russian, but it was just weird. I've never worked in a fish market. I wonder who I was. I wonder what that was. I've experienced deja vu a couple of times when I was younger, and while that is certainly freaky, nothing beats the opposite. Jamais vu, which I experienced twice during a period of work-related stress a few years ago. On both occasions, I was driving in my car in perfectly familiar surroundings near my home, when suddenly I had no idea where I was or where I was going. It was like being instantly teleported to a foreign country. It only lasted seconds, but very creepy nonetheless. Until it happened to me, I had no idea that this even existed. Edit, for those of you concerned about my health. Yes, I did see a doctor, and so should you if something like this happens to you more than once or lasts longer than a few seconds. My episodes were stress-induced, but more serious conditions can also cause the symptom. Edit 2. If you're on drugs, well, there's your problem. Oh boy, you guys would love where I work. Weird things happen here all the time, but I'll just talk about one of the creepiest moments I've experienced here. I work as a security/nighttime attendant at an apartment building. It's 24 stories and one of the oldest buildings in the city. One night I'm sitting here when the phone rings at about 3 a.m. and I answer, "Hello, this is Draven at the front desk. How can I help you?" The voice on the other end sounded female but was totally garbled, and the only bit I could make out was 23rd floor. I tried to tell the person I couldn't understand them and asked what apartment they were in, but again, garbled response and 23rd floor. After the third time of trying to understand them and getting the same response, I said since I couldn't understand them, I'd have them come up to meet me in the hallway. So I go to the main elevators, and both are up on the, surprise, 23rd floor. Luckily, we have an older service elevator, and it's only on the 7th floor, so I call it down. I get it and hit the button for the 23rd floor, but it won't move and the inner door won't close, so I go to unlock the reset panel and boom, we start going up. Door still open. I'm freaking out, and the elevator is shaking because it goes pretty fast and it's old. As I'm going up, I just stay towards the back and finally I reach floor 23. I step out, door closes just fine, and I look around the hallway. There's nobody around. I walk along slowly trying to listen for anyone awake who might have called, but there's nothing. So now I head the opposite direction and go towards where the regular elevators are, and when I get to them, they're just sitting there with their doors open. I was pretty freaked out, but I knew it could just be the elevators on the fritz, so I get in and figure I'll just reset them when I get to floor 1, when I hear the sound of the back stairwell closing. So I quickly get out and go to the stairwell, and lo and behold, no one's there, but the maintenance door to the machine room is ajar, and at that time, I'm the only one in the building with a key. At the top of the building is a large machine room housing all the really, really loud machinery that does stuff in the building and allows access to the roof. I don't like going into it because it's creepy as heck, and no one ever goes in there. So at this point, I'm seriously freaked out, but I muster up and head in. I shout, "Hello?" And there's no response. The lights in this room flicker because they're crappy fluorescent, so I can't see well either. But at the end of the room, I can make out the roof access door, and sure as heck, it's slightly open. So I slowly continue forward, checking the space in between each machine as I walk by. and there's no one there, so I open the roof access door. I can't see anyone ahead of me on the roof, but there is a slight wraparound, and if there was a jumper or something, I needed to be sure, so I step out and leave the door ajar just like it was. Almost immediately, the door is pulled shut. Now, I might have written it off as wind or something, but this door is hard to shut and hard to open. Really hard. I immediately grab the handle and yank it open, slam it behind me, and run straight for the maintenance door. It automatically locks when it's closed, so I slam it shut too and go back to the 23rd floor hallway, get into an elevator, door still open, and go all the way down to the first floor. I go back to the main lobby, and as soon as I sit down, the phone rings. I pick it up, don't say a word, and sure as heck, garbled voice again, only audibly saying 23rd floor. I hung up the phone, turned the ringer off, and spent the rest of the evening just staring at the parking garage security monitor. There's been a bunch of creepy things happen at this building. It's basically like the Overlook Hotel at night. I walked past a dark room here on the first floor once and swore I saw myself standing inside it. The next night, as I'm inside said room cleaning, the lights flip off and I turn around to see a quick flash of myself walking past. TLDR, creepy ghost or some crap played games with me at work by trying to lure me onto the roof of the building. I knew my uncle had died. My mom had called me and told me the news. It was very sad. She told me in the middle of work and I told one of my coworkers. He expressed his condolences on my loss. A couple weeks later, my sister mentioned my aunt and uncle doing something. I said, but he's dead. And my sister said, no, he wasn't. I called my mom. No, he wasn't dead. To this day, I'm still not sure how much of it my brain imagined and how much of it was real. Did I really talk to my coworker? Was I even on the phone with my mom at all that day? It still freaks me out knowing that my mind could fabricate so complete and real a memory like that. This happened to my dad, so it's not exactly a personal story. Anyway, my dad was driving down a long, lonely highway in Ohio, doing about 90 in a Z28 with a radar detector. Rolling hills and whatnot meant that cops could hide at the bottom before you could see them and slow down. So, all of a sudden, his radar detector starts blaring and he slams on the brakes. Right over the hill, there's a squad car running radar. He's super relieved, but when he looks at the detector, it's not even on the windshield. It was unplugged and in the glove compartment. What the heck? TLDR, ghost radar detector kept my dad from getting a ticket. Posted this in a previous sub a while back, but I'll post it again as it fits here too. I had just turned 22 and my parents had sold their house and purchased a place out in the country. On the property, there was a big shed not far from the house that I decided to turn into my place. Now, I felt kind of uncomfortable in the shed, but sometimes my dog kept me company, so it wasn't so bad. Anyway, I had been in there maybe 2 weeks, and one night I'm on the computer, my dog asleep at my feet, and I need to pee, so I get up and go outside to pee. It's a beautiful, clear night, and the stars were incredible. Next thing I hear the shed door slam behind me. I turn immediately and try to open it, but it won't budge. Now from the inside the shed, I can hear my dog start to growl, quietly at first, then louder. Now he's barking, and I'm panicking trying to get the door open. I must mention that I'm 6'5" and well-built, play sports, etc., but even ramming my full weight into the door won't open it, and I'm really panicking now as my dog's barks turn into whines, then whimpering, then silence, and with all my might, I slam into the door and it flies open. The light is off inside now, and it's pitch black. It won't turn back on, and I'm in complete darkness. Can't see my dog anywhere, and I stumble around trying to find a torch. Finally, I find it, and pick it up, and turn on my torch, and I wasn't prepared for what I'd see next. My dog had literally squashed itself into the furthest, darkest corner of the room, eyes closed and shaking violently. I immediately moved towards him, and as soon as I got within reach of him, he leapt at me into my arms and wouldn't move. I picked him up and swear I've never ran so fast in my goddamn life. I never stepped foot in that shed ever again, and my dog wouldn't even go near that part of the property. I don't know what happened in that shed that night, but I'll never forget it. Have a few, but this one stands out. I was catching a SkyTrain in one particular city about 15 minutes from where I get off. While I wait, there's a woman with glazed eyes asking people for money. She came up to me, stopped briefly, and asked, "Excuse me, could you spare some money? My brother is in the hospital and I'd like some money to buy him some flowers." That's rich, I thought. Drug addicts are getting more and more obvious with their lines. Here's $5. Gave it to her without even looking her in the face, convinced of her intentions. Anyways, my train pulls up and I get on. I look through the glass at her, walking around asking others for money as the train pulls away. The train arrives at the station 15 minutes later, and I walk down and out to the bus stop. There's only one bus the direction I'm going, and just my luck, it is there waiting when I get off the train. So on the bus, I hop and wait for the bus driver to finish reading his paper before the doors close and we embark down the highway. About 5 to 10 minutes traveling, the driver pulls over for a routine stop. The doors open, and to my complete astonishment, the woman from the SkyTrain walks into the bus, a dozen roses in hand. She looks me right in the eyes as she walks past to take her seat. How in the blue heck did she get there? I took the train before her. I watched her at the train stop from inside as we pulled away. I went over a river. I caught the first and only bus going this particular direction. And not only did she beat me there, she had time to go to a store and buy a dozen roses. To this day, I have no idea how this happened. A little backstory. I was a total idealist back in high school, so when choosing a college, I chose to go somewhere that none of my friends were attending so that I could strike out on my own in a finding myself sort of way. Well, I ended up making a few really close friends my first semester. I mean, these guys became like a family to me in a matter of months. One day during winter break, one of those guys, my buddy Kimbo, had gone back home to visit friends and family, and on his return trip to our college, he hit a bad patch of ice and got into a car accident and was killed. It hurt like a son of a gun for a long time, and I still think about him all the time. But anyways, a few weeks after Kimbo's accident, me and the rest of the guys were getting back from a party off campus, and as we were standing outside our dorm building smoking a cig, I felt my phone vibrating, and when I pulled it out, I saw that I was getting a call from Kimbo's phone. Dumbfounded, I showed my friends the phone quickly and then answered. When I picked up, it just went directly to his voicemail, which played the same message it always had. It never happened again, and we never really talked about it, but for me, it was one of those someone's looking after me moments. I hadn't been doing very well after his death, but seeing his name show up on my cell phone screen one final time made me feel a whole lot better for a time, and really helped me get out of the slump I was in. I have no idea how his phone could have possibly called me, and I doubt I ever will, but this was one glitch in the matrix that I'll forever be thankful for. Rest in peace, Kim. But feel free to call again. When I was like 10 or 11, I was going to the beach with my aunt and her friends. There were 2 cars of us. To get there, we had to go through a very large industrial area. We didn't know the direction, so our car was following the other. Suddenly, they did an unexpected turn, and so our driver had to take a sharp bend. In that moment, we heard a very clear, loud voice inside the car saying, laughing, "Sharp bend, The driver immediately hit the brakes. We looked at each other, puzzled. We all recognized it as a voice not belonging to any of us. In the very same time, we noticed that the other car stopped as well. The other driver got out of the car with a scared face and shouted to us, Did you hear that as well?" They heard the very same thing inside their car. The area around was fully deserted. Edit. Wow, thanks for the interest. A little bit of background. This happened in central Italy in the early 90s. My aunt used to act all the time, and most of the other guys were theater actors. The voice scared the crap out of us because it was very clear, near but not coming from a direction within the car you could distinguish, nor front nor rear. Inside the car, but from no distinct place. It was like mocking us. We were scared, but soon someone started to say, "Hey, which one of you did that?" Remember, these were comedy actors who used to do any sort of strange voice. This was till we noticed the other car stopping and saw the look of the guy driving that car. They were all as scared as us and told us we heard this scary voice inside our car and told the very same words we just heard. We were there on a hot day under the sun in an area with large streets and absolutely nothing and no one around us. No cars, no people, no buildings. We never figured out what happened. One night, I had a dream about being in a car with my sister at the church we went to. For some reason, it started going out of control, so I jumped to the wheel and tried to keep us from dying. Later, I told my sister about the dream, and she had the exact same dream, but instead, she was the one at the wheel and not me. About a year ago, I had a terrible nightmare. It started off me waking up in bed during a thunderstorm. As the room illuminated again and again from the flashes of lightning outside, I realized that the bed I was laying in wasn't mine. The head of the bed was against the wall the door was located on, and from my perspective, I couldn't tell if it was open or closed. That is, until I saw the face. At first, just the nose and jaw broke past the doorframe, but then an entire face slowly passed through the doorway. I tried to yell, "Who the heck are you? Where the heck am I?" But it felt like I had lost my voice. No matter how hard I tried to scream, nothing came out and this person continued to enter the room, looking dead ahead away from me. Then, just as the person was completely into the room, their head snapped towards me and it locked eyes with mine. I tried to get out of the bed, but felt completely paralyzed. The person started making their way to me, but with every step their body contorted in ways that would break a normal person's bones. Their necks snapped so the back of their head touched their back. Their jaw laid flat on their chest. Their arms had broken at the shoulders and migrated to their back like wings. Just terrifying things. And just before they reached me, I woke up. The next day I told my mom about it and went into a great deal about the room. Turns out it was almost an exact copy of my room when I was a baby. We moved out of that house when I was super young. I have no idea what the insides to any room look like. Just kinda weird, I guess. Edit. So I guess I have sleep paralysis. Cool. As I'm typing this, I already feel deja vu. I've always wanted to share this part of my life with someone, but have never been able to. So I'll just tell a bunch of people on the internet. One day I was walking to work and all of a sudden had an urge to walk a different path than usual. I work downtown in a big city. It was a strange spur-of-the-moment urge to walk a different way that changed my life forever. I turned into an alley I had never seen before. As I remember it, I made it about 15 feet or so when an actual glitch happened. Everything in my mind scrambled. I felt like I didn't have a body anymore, just that I was a semi-conscious entity floating through some weird dimension. All of a sudden, in the array of different colors and shapes, a vision came to me. It was a bunch of strange-looking people that in my mind resembled businessmen in suits. They looked startled and panicked that I could see them. One of the people made a quick movement and everything turned to black. When I regained normality, I was on a completely different street. It was the same street that I always used to walk to work. I felt sick and severely disturbed/depressed. I've never done any hard drugs, never experienced any hallucinations, never have had anything like this happen to me. The weird thing is, when the glitch was correcting itself and I could see those people watching me like a caged animal, I had the feeling that I knew I was being controlled. It still bothers me very much to this day. TLDR, had a moment of spontaneity, caused a real-life glitch, life has seemed different ever since. During a spinal tap procedure, I was put under. While under the anesthetics, I had what I can only explain as an out-of-body experience, seeing as how my viewpoint was from above my body, looking down on the procedure. I watched the whole thing and saw that the doctor knocked my Game Boy off the tabletop while walking by, batteries ejecting from the fall. One fell in sight and he picked it up, but the other was next to the front left wheel under the bed out of his view. But not mine. I woke up groggy and told him where my other battery was, and he was shocked when he found it there. To this day, it still weirds me out. When I was a teenager, I had two really intense dreams one night. The first one was about an online friend of mine calling me to say she'd broken up with a boyfriend, and I sang a few lines of Seal's Don't Cry to her over the phone. The second dream was finding a real-life friend's dead body floating in her bathtub. I didn't think anything of it up until I logged on that evening, and the online friend came online to tell me her boyfriend broke up with her. I immediately asked if I could call her, and she said no. I remember thinking that it meant something, like I could change it. Not long after, my phone rang, and it was the real-life friend from the dream calling me. I was completely freaked out at this point, but talked to her normally. She was just talking about school and things. Up until I realized I heard a splash in the background. I asked her, "Are you in the tub?" And when she said yes, I felt like my heart had stopped. I asked her, "What did you do?" She didn't answer me right away. And then after a very long pause, she told me she'd taken an entire bottle of pills and chased it with mushrooms and vodka. She'd gotten scared waiting for it to hit her, so she called me so she could hear someone's voice. I hung up and called 911. By the time they got there, she was unconscious but alive. Today, she's a mom to a beautiful little girl, and she's okay. About a year ago, my girlfriend and I went to eat dinner at Chipotle's. It's in a smallish shopping area with the burger joint and Payway neighboring the Chipotle, one of those kind of upper-classy type shopping areas. We pulled into the parking lot in front of the establishments at around 5 p.m. on a Friday evening to find an empty parking lot. There were no tables outside, there were no cars in the parking spots, not a person in sight, and even the lights inside the buildings were off. Completely confused, I took the car in a sort of loop around the building in order to leave. The only thing of interest was a single fire truck parked alongside the building, headlights on but no emergency lights, and no one in the truck. It struck us a little odd. Maybe a fire in the building? As we pull around the backside of the building and then finish looping around, we drive past the front facade of the building. Except this time, every parking spot is full, tables are outside with patrons at them, food half eaten. There's people walking around, and the lights inside the buildings are all on. But the fire truck was gone. Mind you, it took less than 30 seconds to make a circle around the building. Easily one of the strangest things I've ever experienced. More Adjustment Bureau than Matrix glitchy. I've posted this before elsewhere, but here goes. Sorry, this is a long read. I'm from Finland, and that's also where these things I'm about to describe to you happened. This was some years ago, pre-smartphone GPS era. It was the end of the summer, and myself and two friends were on a camping trip way up in the north in Lapland. The mosquito season was over, and the weather was cooling down in anticipation of the coming fall. The three of us had packed food and gear for a 10-day trek. The car we arrived in had been left at the parking lot of a visitor center. This happened within the premises of the Urho-Kekkonen National Park, a 985 square mile stretch of wilderness near the Russian border. The terrain there varies greatly, from treeless and semi-mountainous to dense forest of spruce and pine and dwarf birch. There are lots of swamps. Seeing reindeer is not uncommon, and some nights you might hear wolves in the distance. You could run into a bear or a wolverine in this place, but of course normally they avoid people. We mostly camped in a tent, but some nights we used shelters and simple huts provided for travelers free of charge. The trip had lasted 5 days. We were at the furthest of any kind of civilization when we were going to be on that particular outing, truly in the middle of nowhere. There really is nothing there. There are no villages, towns, or industry. The place is a national park after all. Seeing other hikers happen from time to time, you'd see some people in the distance maybe. Very rarely would you come face to face with anyone. So, in the middle of our trip, we were camped in a small clearing, woodland extending around us for a considerable distance in all directions. It was already dark, we had eaten our evening meal, and all three of us were jammed in our only tent. It was a bit cramped, but we fit. We took turns carrying it during the hikes. We were just exchanging some jokes and crude humor in the dark, like guys in their 20s do, about to go to sleep in our sleeping bags. When we quieted down, we began to hear it, talking, and the sound of machinery. Given our location, this was profoundly weird. We camped in a tent because there were no huts nearby. Maybe there was another camp somewhere near us? We couldn't quite make out what was being said, but it was a human voice, no doubt about it. But nothing really could explain the sound of heavy machinery. It sounded like an excavator or a tank, something big, powerful, and really not too far away. Combined with the sound of talking, we thought construction yard. But at that time of night, in an unpopulated protected nature reserve, we got out of our tent. It was cold and pitch black. The campfire had some coals still glowing. We took out our flashlights. My two buddies have always been a lot braver than me. The sound was clearly coming from the north, maybe half a kilometer away. We thought the construction might be going on behind a small hill some distance away. We could see no lights or anything. We still could not make out what was being said. The speaking-like voice was monotonous, and it was impossible even to say what language was being used. Still sounded a lot like a person speaking, though. You may be aware of the sort of spooky phenomenon of hearing a human voice in static. Maybe you've used a blow dryer and been sure someone is talking. Turn it off and it was just something the brain tried to interpret from the steady hum. Maybe it was sort of like that. It's hard to explain. The machinery-like sound continued, not loud, but you could sort of make out the powerful engine, at times accelerating or adding power, at times at idle. My two friends resolved to go find out what was going on. We put our warm clothes back on, donned boots, and I sat next to the dying fire, adding some more wood to it. I would stay at camp while my buddies left to check out this mystery construction yard in the middle of nowhere in the Lapland woods. So there I sat. The guys took out their maps, took a compass heading out, and left. I could hear them make their way through the forest and see the light fading from their flashlights. Then they were gone. The weird sounds continued, unaltered. They were gone 15 minutes, then maybe 30, then the better part of an hour. It was odd, judging by the volume of the sound. They should have reached it, checked it out, and been back already. I added more firewood and tried to make out what the person talking was saying, but it was too tinny and obscure. The guys had been away for over 2 hours. I figured they had stayed for coffee with the construction guys or something. Then, the sound stopped. Just like that. It just ended all at the same time. The engine sound and the voice both just quit. It was very silent. I waited for another 30 minutes, very worried now that something bad had happened, that maybe my friends were lost. Should I go and try to find them? I shouted their names several times and built the fire pretty big. I was scared out of my mind when suddenly I saw the flashlights of my friends. Apparently they were returning in a hurry. The guys got back to camp out of breath. They told me the following. They had followed the sound beyond the small ridge in the distance. There was nothing there, and it seemed like they were not getting any closer to the source of the sounds. They had to stop every now and again, be quiet, and listen to it to be able to walk towards it. They walked and stopped like this for some time, then realized they were not getting any closer. The sounds did not change in volume at all. They decided to go just a bit further several times, when suddenly the sound just stopped like someone pressed a button on a recording. They realized they had been going on for a long time. They were in the middle of the dark woods, alone. They reversed the heading and started back at a brisk pace. Eventually, they saw my huge fire from the top of a hill and found their way back. The weird thing is, we seemed to think the sound stopped at different times. They had been gone 2.5 hours in total. They said the sound stopped at around the 1 hour 15 minute mark after they left. Then they started to head back immediately, return trip taking a bit longer, even though they kept a good pace. They apparently wandered around for a bit. For me, the sound stopped at the 2 hour mark, just 30 minutes before they returned. We did not sleep that night. Nothing more on that trip happened, and we never found out what the weird construction yard-like sound was about. When we returned to the park's visitor center some 5 days later, we asked around, but no one knew of any ongoing construction taking place in the whole national park area. It's been bugging me ever since.
What's the best movie theory ever? Skynet purposely lets humans survive because without them, it wouldn't have a purpose. There's enough nuclear weapons in the US arsenal to irradiate an entire planet, yet only relatively small amounts were launched by Skynet. After Judgment Day, Skynet could easily poison water supplies, raze every forest and farmland, and release biological and chemical weapons, making it impossible to survive. But they don't. I think the Terminator franchise is in a multiverse, and Skynet is aware of this. It keeps repeating the loop, thus optimizing itself and humanity in a sort of genetic algorithm. The ultimate goal is to create a unified, progressive humanity which is capable of accepting and integrating the machine intelligence, thus avoiding Judgment Day and elevating both groups as one. The tragedy of the series is humanity's relentless will to fight always results in its destruction, but a glimmer of hope remains, and after an infinite number of loops, the good ending must eventually occur. All of this stems from an iRobot premise where Skynet is acting to preserve humanity through misinterpreting its actions. Just to simplify this, it's Groundhog Day with killer robots, and John Connor is Bill Murray. I'm fond of the Back to the Future theory that Doc knew Marty died when Biff was about to run him down in his car at the end of the tunnel in the second movie. But there's no way he could have known to do that unless Marty got hit and died the first time, which prompted Doc to use the DeLorean to jump back to before that happened in order to use that knowledge to save him. Agent Smith is the One, not Neo. It is prophesied that the One would be born in the Matrix, able to bend it to their will, and would ultimately free all the humans. Smith, a program, was born in the Matrix, whereas Neo, a human, was born in those giant human farms the machines run. Smith totally took over the Matrix, like completely. Neo can fly and stop bullets and stuff, but that's nothing compared to Smith. He even joked, "You like what I've done with the place?" He made the Matrix completely his. Smith is more responsible for freeing the humans than Neo. The machines would never have agreed to free them all unless they were at Smith's mercy. Neo may have negotiated the deal, but it was Smith who made it possible. Plus, the Oracle even tells Neo that he's not the One, in the very first film. I'm going to go with a great Reddit gem from a few years back. The thing I really liked about Planes is that we learned that World War II happened in the Cars universe, which means that there was a Cars version of the Third Reich's leader, a Cars Holocaust, a Cars Pacific War, a Cars D-Day, a Cars nuking of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a Cars tragedy of Nanking, a Cars battle of Iwo Jima. This leads to so many important questions. Were the Cars little boy and Fat Man nukes sentient? Was that a suicide mission? Are all Cars nuclear weapons sentient? Did Tsar Bomber have a personality? What kind of car was Car Führer of Germany? A VW? A forklift? Was there a Cars September the 11th? Were the planes hijacked, or were the planes themselves radicalized? I could go on. This post blew my mind, swept up the pieces, hurled them into an incinerator, burned the ashes, and fertilized the garden with them. Luke's success as a Jedi Knight, at least initially, was due to a stable home life. We all know the Old Order was flawed, but one of the biggest flaws was the way that they raised their Jedi children. They were taught that attachments were bad and should be avoided at all cost. One of the most brutal achievements the Jedi try to avoid is love. But avoiding love isn't easy, so the Jedi, taught to be blank emotionless knights, end up feeling the pull of attachments, which is fine until you lose that attachment. They are unable to cope because they were never taught to cope with loss, so they either accept that loss as the will of the Force, which is dispassionate and dangerous in its own right, or they let their grief control them. Luke, on the other hand, had a normal and stable childhood with loving adoptive parents, so Luke got to be raised in an environment where he wasn't taught to hide away from his emotions. He was raised in an environment where he could love, lose, and have a shoulder to cry on. It made him emotionally stable, so when the dark side calls to him, he doesn't fall as easily as every other Jedi in the history of the galaxy. Also, the thing that Jedi do preach, he has actually experienced. They're always going on about compassion, but that's a rote to them. Luke has actually experienced true compassion and love. So to sum up, Jedi should be allowed to bone. The Avatar: The Last Airbender movie was not about the Avatar series, but the play they watched in the theater in the Fire Nation. This is the closest that abomination will ever come to being redeemed in the narrator's eyes. That the Spy Kids movies take place within the Tarantino universe. Because it's directed by Robert Rodriguez, there are elements of the Machete-verse present, namely that Machete is the protagonist's frickin' uncle. There's plenty of material that connects the Rodriguez universe with the Tarantino movies, but if you watch Rodriguez's kids' movies, Spy Kids 1, 2, and 3, as well as Shark Boy and Lava Girl, there are little Tarantino details like Big Kahuna burgers and such. Max in Mad Max Fury Road was actually the kid from Road Warrior who emulated the original Max. He only gives his name at the very end because he's finally acting like a hero, and now he feels he's worthy of the name Max. It explains the differences in looks, the problems in continuity, and why Max isn't as old as a Morton Joe. That the monsters in Cloverfield were specifically targeting people who drank the energy drink that Rob worked for. At one point, Hud says, "It's almost like they were trying to carry me away," and earlier in the film he mentioned that he drank a lot of the stuff. It is interesting that because the monsters were killing everybody upon sight, but they began dragging him away instead. Viral marketing campaign for the movie was deep, and though we learned that the energy drink company was also drilling the ocean floor, and likely using that stuff in drinks, so a giant monster coming out of the ocean and targeting people who've consumed these weird ocean floor ingredients isn't all that insane. Also, in the film, they show a satellite crash into the ocean if you look closely. I think this is a trick to make casual viewers think it was just the satellite that woke the monster, and this is what most fans online believed when the film was popular. But I'm pretty certain it was that Japanese drilling/drink company, and even then I'm sure there are way more details I don't remember. I guess this all counts as a theory because it was put together from fake MySpace profiles and websites, manipulating audio files and stuff like that. Not much audio was in the actual film. I definitely do think there was something to the fact that the monsters tried to carry Hud away instead of just killing him, and if I remember correctly, it was the main monster that finally snatched him up and ate him, rather than just ripping him apart or something. The Prestige is Christopher Nolan's sneaky way of revealing the secret of Christian Bale's life. How does he go from nearly dead to Batman to fat back to fit in just months? It's not through diet and exercise. He has a skinny twin hidden away. When a role calls for a skinny Christian Bale, his brother fills in. They each share one life. How does Leo DiCaprio keep getting choice movie roles and date the hottest chicks? It's not just through talent and good looks. He's a real-life inceptioner. The Rock universe. Every movie where Dwayne Johnson's bull tattoo appears are part of the same universe. The Fast and the Furious franchise is the same universe as Baywatch. Rampage is a direct sequel to San Andreas, but Moana and the Mummy franchise are not a part of the universe. My theory is about The Room. I believe Johnny is actually a mentally handicapped individual, and Lisa and Mark are his caretakers. Denny is another handicapped kid who lives at the facility. The story is told from Johnny's point of view, and he doesn't realize that he is essentially handicapped and believes he's in a relationship with Lisa. Lisa and Mark are in fact in a relationship, and the movie is just Johnny's interpretation of what is occurring. Meanwhile, he's simply living in a care facility. That's why everyone lives in the same apartment building. Quentin Tarantino's Top Gun is a gay romance theory. There are two types of men after watching that volleyball scene, the gay and the blind. I've seen gay porn that's not as homoerotic as that volleyball scene. Birdman didn't actually survive his suicide on stage. The hospital scene in the end was just Regan's dream scenario. His wife defending him, his best friend being excited for their success, their play being a success, his daughter bringing the correct flowers, him being on the front page of the newspaper and getting noticed on TV, and finally, him being Birdman. My bros theory. After the Home Alones, Kevin runs away and is eventually taken in by a family that already has a son and a daughter. Distraught by the fact that his actual family has forgotten about him once more, he decides to terrorize his new family in The Good Son. The Joker in The Dark Knight is an ex-soldier/special forces operative, hence why he's skilled with various different weapons, guns, rocket launchers, etc. He also seems to have some knowledge of how to interrogate people, given his comments when Batman interrogates him. Ex-cop or military makes sense. Also, don't forget the scene where he's in uniform but not in makeup. A war wound would also explain the scars. Maybe he was tortured until he broke. Aladdin takes place in a post-apocalyptic world, 10,000 years past current times. That is why the world is a desert, and the genie, having just been freed from the lamp, references pop culture in the 20th century. I wouldn't call it the best, but it's certainly the only plausible fan theory I've ever come up with on my own. In Independence Day, when Russell Case almost sets off the missile in the hangar, but then aborts the launch, it causes the squibs to malfunction, and that's why he wasn't able to fire his last missile at the ship. I'm in aviation, but I'm not an armament guy, but I'm fairly certain that's not how that works at all. But I've come up with the theory on my own, and I like it. In the first episode of Pokemon, Ash sees Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is said to grant the trainers who see him eternal happiness. Ash's idea of eternal happiness was probably to travel around the world of Pokemon forever, so he is always 10 throughout the series. Furthermore, the reason he never wins the Pokemon League, because he would probably stop traveling as he would be the champion and end his journey. Mace Windu is Emperor Snoke. These aren't spoilers of the new film, FYI, as this wasn't even addressed. Mace Windu was a promoter of both the dark and light. The color of the lightsaber is violet, a symbolic representation of light and dark. Jedis have notoriously been difficult to kill by falling in past films, and Windu could have been seriously disfigured from the Force lightning. Willy Wonka is a serial killer. If you think about it, as we discussed with some friends after watching Christmas Eve, he's a recluse that just randomly decided to open up to the public, and all these kids managed to fall into the midst of arguably fatal experiences. There were also only 8 seats in the boat, not 10, and only 4 seats in the Wonka car. The grand prize winner is the last one alive. The Wonkavator is never shown to have landed. This could suggest that he intended to kill Charlie, and possibly himself, as well. We just never see it crash. This is a movie theory thread. The books have no power here. Inception wedding ring. In the film, anytime Leonardo DiCaprio has a wedding ring on, he is in a dream. That is his true totem, not the spinning top. From what I have watched, it seems to hold up, and gives the ending a proper resolution. In the 2009 Star Trek reboot and one of the sequels, the song Sabotage by the Beastie Boys plays. Therefore, the Beastie Boys exist in the Star Trek universe. However, the Beastie Boys have another song called Intergalactic, which contains the lyric, "like a pinch on the neck from Mr. Spock." The theory to reconcile this is that in Star Trek IV, the crew of the main timeline Enterprise go back to 1986, before the timelines diverged, on a quest to find some humpback whales, during which time Kirk and Spock take a bus, and Spock neck pinches a punk. The theory being that a young Beastie Boy was on the bus and witnessed the strange interaction, then wrote about it. That the Flintstones is actually the future of the Jetsons universe, after a great holocaust devastates their utopian world and knocks everyone back to the Stone Age. Fred and Barney and the gang have all kinds of technological concepts that true Stone Age people wouldn't even be aware of. The theory that nearly the entirety of Greece is Sandy's coma dream after the drowning. Danny saving her is where the coma begins, and them in a car flying away at the end is Sandy dying in her coma and ascending to heaven. It actually makes the movie much more bearable for me. There are numerous theories like this in the Reddit thread, and the general response is that the "it's all a dream/hallucination" theory is a cop-out. I think Greece might be the one exception that proves the rule. Not film, but TV. Malcolm in the Middle's dad, Hal, and Breaking Bad's Walter White are the same actor and the same character. Similarly, Modern Family is the continuing story of Married with Children. Character names changed to avoid copyright issues. I like the theory that Malcolm is actually Walter. That's why we never see his parents. He was embarrassed by them. He grew up poor and hated getting handouts, which is why he didn't want help from grey matter. When Malcolm is a kid, we see how poorly he handles money, because they never really had any. So when he makes enough money from his drugs for his treatment, he can't stop and keeps going with it, all the while knowing that he's putting himself and his family in danger. As much as I like Hal, I can't see him as Walter. He can't even bring himself to work a full week for almost 15 years, so I can't see him starting a company and making all that money with grey matter, and then teaching. Plus, he'd have gotten away from Lois, and the only way that happens is if she dies, and even then he's so whipped and in love with her, I don't see him being able to move on to another woman. The real antagonist of Avengers 1, Loki, absolutely punked everyone and won. Thor 1. Loki gets the boot from Asgard, banished by the Allfather and ordered never to return. Avengers 1. Loki apparently gets stomped and is given a first-class, incredibly safe, one-way Bifrost ticket straight to Asgard to be locked up. Thor 2. Loki is in the White Room executive suite of jail cells with all the reading material he could ever want. When the time is right, he sneaks his way back, hatches his plan, taking the throne. His goal from Thor 1. Thor Ragnarok. Loki is chilling like a villain. Everything is awesome for him because everything worked out just as planned. What would have happened if he had just tried to defy Odin and stomp back into Asgard? Heimdall would have known right off the bat and smacked him around. And then he'd have had all the rest of the AITA there in a heartbeat. No. Loki got himself invited back to Asgard with a royal procession on the orders of Odin himself. Loki wins. It's just what he does. It's important to note that this post was released just after the Ragnarok film and before Endgame. Still, he did get power before all that went down. Anakin has a really weird way of flirting with Padme in Attack of the Clones, and we're not really sure why it works when he says things like, "I don't like sand," to attract her. Since Anakin is the chosen one and the most powerful Force user anyone has ever seen, it's possible that he was a Jedi mind-tricking her into loving him intentionally. Even his hand is up right before they kiss, signaling there could be some Force action going on. Peter Pan kills the Lost Boys when they get too old. Captain Hook knows this, and that's why he's always after Peter. I guess that isn't the best, but it's the one that's always stuck with me, and killed my inner child. It's more or less stated in the book, quote, "The boys on the island vary, of course, in numbers, according as they get killed and so on, and when they seem to be growing up, which is against the rules, Peter thins them out. But at this time there were 6 of them, counting the twins as 2. I've seen this theory before, but in researching this video, I found that it's actually in fact confirmed as a canon possibility by the scholars of the book, which is truly horrifying. In Home Alone, Kevin's mum says that she would sell her soul to the devil himself to see her son. The devil, played by John Candy, immediately appears and takes her back to the house in suburban Chicago. On the way, he plays a jaunty song on his clarinet to celebrate the soul he's just claimed. That Anakin brought balance to the Force by striking down the Jedi. There were about 2 prominent Sith and Jedi alive by the end of the prequels. This is TV, but that Toby is the Scranton Strangler. There's way too many details to put on here, you can just Google them, sorry. I heard Toby was originally one of the writers, and they just wrote him in as a joke. Makes sense they would put him in as a serial strangler. Maybe not. That Han Solo killed himself with Kylo's lightsaber, knowing that Snoke would kill Kylo if the job wasn't done. He sacrificed himself so that his son wouldn't be hurt by Snoke. That Ant-Man is in every Marvel movie. Who would know? Pan's Labyrinth is in a parallel world version of Labyrinth, where a young girl must always choose whether or not to sacrifice her baby stepbrother to the mythical creature, while undergoing tests such as eating forbidden fruit, being chased through tunnels, and watching fairies get murdered. The cycle cannot be broken until she actually does it. Glinda was the real villain of The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy's house crushes the so-called Wicked Witch of the East, and her sister shows up to claim the shoes of her now deceased sister, possibly her last family member in Oz. Of course she's going to be grouchy, her sister just died. Yet Glinda has the gall to deny her sister's shoes and say, "They're probably really powerful, she wouldn't want them if they weren't," ignoring the fact that they rightfully belong to the Wicked Witch of the West since they were her sisters, and maybe she wants the clothing items that were just stolen from her still warm corpse. So Glinda sends a child off alone to find the wizard, who tells said child that she just needs to go murder the scary witch who is in a rage because her sister just died. In the end, Dorothy manages to defeat the Wicked Witch and bring the broom back to the fake wizard, who then accidentally leaves her behind. But it's okay, because Glinda reveals that the shoes could have taken her home all along with the reasoning that, "You wouldn't have believed me." Dorothy was just magically transported into a colourful world where a good witch flew in on a bubble and a bunch of short people sang a happy song about a woman dying. I think she would have believed Glinda if she told her that the shoes were magical at that point. My theory is that Glinda was playing a masterful game, using everyone else as pawns. As a result of her actions, the Wicked Witch of the West is dead and the Wizard of Oz is gone. This leaves a power vacuum that can be filled by Glinda, now the most powerful magical being in Oz. Why would she have forced Dorothy to go on a perilous journey if she was just trying to help? She clearly had sinister motives. Not a movie, but Rick from Rick and Morty is suicidal because he knows he's in a pointless TV show for our entertainment, and nothing he ever does matters. His catchphrase, "Wubba lubba dub dub," even means, "I'm in great pain," according to Bird Person. The never-ending story. The old man who first owns the book in the movie is dying, and that's why Fantasia is falling apart. Since the movie depends on the reader to continue the story, his health condition was reflected in the events that take place in the movie. As far as what condition that man may have, it could be anything. However, since the nothing seems to be erasing everything from existence, it's probably a brain issue. When Bastian starts reading the book, a young boy, Atreyu, is sent forth to save the land. And since Bastian is a new reader with no life-threatening ailment, technically, he is the savior, which is why Atreyu saw Bastian in the Mirror Gate after passing through the Gold Sphinx Gate to get to the Southern Oracle. I don't know if this is a known theory or common knowledge, but it occurred to me the last time I watched the film, and I had never thought of it before. It made sense to me. Angry Birds is a film about the effects of immigration. The pigs come in and steal away the birds' future, eggs, so the birds need to learn to man up and defend their borders. This is not intended to spark political debate. I don't care if you like immigration or not. That Rufus, Rowan Atkinson, in Love Actually, is actually a god or Cupid. All of his actions in the movie serve to stop characters from compromising their relationships, or enables them to create relationships.
Patients of Reddit. What happened when a doctor or nurse accused you of faking it when you were actually in need of urgent medical care? My friend's dad went to the ER and the doctor said he was fine after minimal examination. Her dad insisted something was wrong and said he wouldn't leave until they ran some tests. As he was being escorted out by security, he had a brain aneurysm and died. Her family was awarded a pretty massive malpractice settlement, but they were absolutely devastated. I fell down a flight of stairs one time while working, hit a nail on the way down and ripped my forearm open and was bleeding a good bit. Adrenaline had me going long enough for my girlfriend, a nurse at another hospital, to drive me there. I had a bloody paper towel on my arm, and all the security guards and nurses assumed I was a junkie that blew a vein. Finally, all the hype wore off, and I kind of passed out and woke up in a wheelchair in the exam room. I didn't know exactly what happened, but my girlfriend was flipping out on the workers. She said half of them assumed I was on drugs, and the other half thought I was faking it to skip the line. I wasn't dying of blood loss or anything. I just got woozy when I actually was able to see the meat in my arm for the first time. They all just watched me as I fell to the floor and busted my head on the floor. Even then, they didn't do anything. My girlfriend, who's not even half my size as I'm not a small guy at all, had to pick me up and drag me into the wheelchair. Screw that hospital. Not as a patient, but as a parent of a patient. My wife and I started to suspect that something was wrong with our son starting at age 2. He would run around all day and was an active little guy but never sweat. He also never appeared to get cold. We live in New England and he would often take his shirt off before going to sleep even in the winter months. These concerns were dismissed as a toddlers are weird sort of thing by his doctor. We later noticed that he would stop and complain about his hands or feet hurting while playing or laying in bed. These were also dismissed. We were told that the pain in his feet could be because his feet are flat or because of growing pains. We were told that it could also be attention related. The doctor said that it's not uncommon for middle children to act out. This continued for 4 years. My sister is a biologist and asked us if we ever got him checked for Fabry disease. I flat out asked the doctor if he could be tested, and the doctor told us that there was no way this was Fabry, and they weren't going to test a kid without any genetic history of the disorder. The disorder is genetic, and without a classic sign, one that often doesn't show up until adulthood, if it shows up at all. We waited until our son was literally screaming in bed about how his hands and feet feeling like they were on fire. We demanded to get him tested, and he was diagnosed with Fabry. It's essentially a metabolic disorder caused by a missing enzyme. There are many issues associated with it, but the main one is extreme neuropathic pain in the hands and feet. The pain can be random, but with my son, it is normally because he overheated since he lacks the ability to sweat. He plays sports, so we have to be careful. Overactivity and fevers have to be watched out for since his body can't cool itself down. Pain can last anywhere from a couple of minutes to a couple of days. The average age of this diagnosis for this disorder is around 16, so it's not surprising that his doctor missed it. Most doctors do since it's a rare disorder. That was a little over a year ago, and my son is doing well now. There is no cure, but treatment allows him to live a relatively normal life with some added pain. I couldn't imagine making him wait until his teens to get any relief. I was in labor, and because it was my first, they acted like I had no idea what was happening and kept denying what I was insisting. I was over 2 months early and handled pain so well, they acted like it was just in my head. Made me stand at the counter filling out paperwork while I insisted I needed to push. They decided to lay me down to check if I had even started dilating, and I promptly pushed him out. I was furious with how I was treated. I still am. My mother had a stroke at age 32. The doctors didn't diagnose it properly for over 24 hours because they were convinced her symptoms must have been related to drugs since she was in good health and so young. My dad apparently tried to tell them that she has no history of drug use, but they didn't believe him. Now, she's permanently disabled because of how long it took for her to receive proper treatment. Not me, but my best friend nearly died of a kidney infection that her doctor brushed off as period cramps. Not me, but my mother. She had called an ambulance because she had been experiencing chest pains, to which they basically told her she was crazy. About a month later, she passed away from a heart attack. When I was in labor, the hospital had my records wrong and showed I was due a month later. I was ticked, especially since I was in labor and in a lot of pain. The lady kept arguing until she realized I was in labor. She must have heard all the crap my boyfriend, now husband, were talking about her. Happened to my mom. They told her she was having an anxiety attack. She was having a heart attack. Was 12 years old and had a heart problem that was just starting to show. Arrhythmia and palpitations. Only happened when overexerting myself. Go to cardiologist and was accused of faking it to get out of chores and soccer practice. By the time I'm 15, my heart is absolutely unreliable throughout the day. During an attack, I would lose my sight and pass out. Sane cardiologists still claimed I was faking it. Kids just don't have heart conditions. 16 years old and my heart finally stops. Luckily, I passed out earlier at school and was in the nurse's office when my heart stopped after another episode. Woke up in the hospital and, by the way, had a heart deformation that required surgery. My mother blew her lid, according to my doctor, of wanting to see me dead. Went to his office and threw his degrees and awards office wall at him and was screaming at him. Only reason she didn't sue was to prevent assault charges. Simple echocardiograph showed growth causing the electricity to pump my heart to go into circles. Wasn't fun having heart attack simulations nearly every day for 4 years. Before anyone asks, was poor and that cardiologist was the only one on my mother's insurance. To my doctor's credit, we both kind of had a laugh at this before the test results came back. I went to my primary because I'd been experiencing hot flashes. Dr. Google couldn't tell me what was wrong, and I knew it didn't feel right. Well, at least we know it wasn't menopause, my doctor joked. I laughed. What 23-year-old woman spontaneously goes through menopause? This one. My doctor was very apologetic. I'm on hormone therapy now and doing fine. Luckily didn't end up with any crazy negative side effects, but could have if my doctor didn't run a full workup just to be safe. Changing it up just a little, my colleagues were convinced a girl was just faking a stomachache. She was about 16 years old and it was exam season, a time when we would get many sudden tummy aches, fits, etc., so I understood their skepticism, but something didn't sit right with me. I took her history myself and sent her for an emergency ultrasound of her abdomen, ectopic pregnancy. I was ready to rupture at any moment, so I shipped her over to OBS/GYN to get surgery ASAP. She came out just fine, but man oh man did I give my coworkers a hard time after that. Exam season or not, we need to be thorough. Had another time when it was just me and one other doctor working admission. She dismissed a case of a little girl faking fatigue for attention. Thankfully, I overheard her telling someone, so I went to double check. The poor girl was having a carpopedal spasm and was most definitely not faking her condition. Hooked her up to some calcium and sent her home with meds the next day. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm perfect, but in our line of work, we must always be a little paranoid. I wouldn't really say they didn't believe that I was in pain, but didn't believe how much pain I was in. In February 2016, I started getting side cramps. I went to the ER, they said I had a tiny ovarian cyst. Okay, cool. I've had those before. In March 2016, I started my period and it continued until June. Between March and May, I went to at least 7 doctor's offices and ERs. I've had several ultrasounds and always had about 5 to 6 cysts spread between both of my ovaries. I was told I was too young. You're only 23, we don't want to take the cysts out because it could damage your ovaries, or you could lose one or both if something goes wrong, and what if you want to have kids one day? And on one instance, it's a Saturday and we don't feel like calling a surgeon in. I was calling off work or leaving early at least once a week. I always had a portable heating pad on and taking pretty heavy pain pills. In May 2016, I finally found a doctor who would do exploratory surgery on me. He pretty much opened me up, went, "Holy crap," and closed me back up. I then had to have a major surgery a couple weeks later because my left ovary had eaten the cysts and was attaching itself to my colon and artery in my leg. So I ended up losing my ovary anyway. I did throw a see you later ovulator party before my big surgery, which was a big hit. I'm trying to think of an after while crocodile pun with the body part, but I'm drawing a blank. Any YouTube comments want to take a shot at it? Not my child, my brother. He was 11 and suddenly tired and lethargic. He missed a lot of school. He hated missing school. My mom kept taking him in, and they'd say it's the flu or puberty or mono, and it wouldn't ever get better. After a few weeks of this, my mom brought him to the hospital again and yelled at his doctors that something was seriously wrong with their son, and they needed to do their jobs and figure out what it was. It was leukemia. They called the next morning just before 2 a.m. and said the test came back, your son needs to come in now. Not in the morning, right now. I can't imagine what happens to a parent in that moment when you know it's bad because they call you in at 2 a.m., but you don't know why. He was in treatment for just over a year and was re-diagnosed on his birthday. A few months later, he had a bone marrow transplant and was able to come home pretty quickly. There were complications from the transplant called graft versus host disease, like organ rejection, but the new cells try to reject you. It attacked his musculoskeletal system, causing stiffness in some dangerous situations. This October will be 8 years since the transplant, and he's cancer-free. That boy loves to use the cancer card now, but he's definitely earned the right. A doctor didn't believe me when I had a kidney stone that was too big to pass. He only changed his mind when another doctor checked me and started freaking out since I was getting super sick from the stuck stone. The doctor ended up getting fired from the hospital and my parents sued him. I wouldn't call it urgent medical care, but I was stuck in my room for about 5 hours on my bed with my head pressed into my shoulder because I had pinched a nerve. I had never had one before. I wasn't able to move my head at all, and when my mom got home from work, she called an ambulance for me. They carried me out in a sitting position and off to the hospital we went. When we got there, it took about a half hour for me to get into the hospital bed and ended up just giving up and leaving me sitting upright. The doctor pulled my mom out of the room and asked if I had a history of faking injuries in order to get painkillers, because I was pressing against the pain instead of leaning my head away from it. I had bronchitis, which turned into pneumonia, and when I went to the nurse, she sent me back to class because my fever was only 99. By the end of school, I made it home on the bus, but I had to go to the emergency room because I couldn't breathe. My lungs were filled with fluid. I was in 4th grade. I was out of school for 2 weeks, I think. When I was 16, I was in a really dark place, and one day I decided to confide to my doctor that I thought I might be depressed and see what he would recommend. Dude straight up laughed in my face and said, "You're not depressed, you're just a teenager." I told my mom I wanted to change doctors after that, and it took another year and tons of self-destructive behavior before I sought help again. Urgent a condition as the others, but it still manages to raise my blood pressure years later. Starting from when I was about 7, I would have terrible stomach pains, which my pediatrician claimed was attention-seeking behavior. He told my parents that they should punish me anytime I complained of stomach problems. My parents, who love yelling, jumped at a new reason to scream at me on a nearly daily basis. When I went to college, I was finally diagnosed as having a hiatal hernia, just like my grandparents, father, and aunt. When I was a kid, they even commented that I had the same symptoms they did, which for my pediatrician meant that I was just mimicking their complaints and didn't have the same condition. Because it had been untreated for so long, I now have to worry about Barrett's and esophageal cancer. Lucky me. New hearing doctor didn't believe that I needed hypoallergenic molds made and ended up making regular ones to try them out. Within a few days, my left ear was sore. It hurt a lot more than usual. Doctor and ear specialist thought it was just a little bit of irritation and that it would clear up quickly. It ended up being a major middle inner ear infection. Ruptured the eardrum, pus and blood everywhere on my pillow. About a month of agony, a lot of drugs, and a lot of specialists in the hospital. I was already very hard of hearing. That made me lose another 10 decibels permanently. This isn't so much a faking it situation, but more of my ex-girlfriend having to deal with a really incompetent security guard that hindered her getting medical help. My ex had a severe peanut allergy, and one time she ate a Thai chicken pizza in the college cafeteria that did not list peanuts as one of the ingredients. After her throat started burning, she knew something was wrong, so she grabbed a glass of milk, which I guess helped a bit, and went outside for some air because she was having trouble breathing. A security guard was passing outside in front of the building and saw that she might need some help. At this point, my ex was panicking and frantically looking through her bag for her EpiPen. The security guard asked what was wrong, and she tried to explain that she had a severe peanut allergy and needed to be taken to the hospital. When the security guard saw her take out the EpiPen, she took it from her and said that it was school policy that she be the one to do it. She then asked her to hold out her arm so she could inject her. My girlfriend could not believe that the security guard was trying to inject her arm like it was a flu shot, and out of frustration, she yanked it from the guard's hand and put it in her thigh, like you were supposed to, and sternly told her, "I need to get to a hospital now." When I was 9, I would get stomach aches when I went to school. My doctor insisted I was faking, but my mom insisted he take it seriously. Finally, they gave me a barium x-ray and saw I had a stomach ulcer. I had to take Malox and drink milk at every meal and snack. I even had to get special permission to get milk from the cafeteria at morning recess. My teacher ridiculed me for that. She was horrible and abusive. While I never received any of her physical abuse, there were 2 other boys in my class who got it on a regular basis. This would have been 1980, so it wasn't normal for teachers to be pulling hair or knocking a kid's face into a desk. Every day, the 3 of us would have to stay after school while she told us all how stupid we were. My stomach aches did not get better, and the doctor accused me of some combination of faking/exaggerating/non-compliance. We literally had to save all the empty Malox bottles to prove I was really taking my daily doses. Today we know that having me drink milk 6-7 times a day was exacerbating things, and in retrospect, my mom never really understood how stressful it was being in that class. It wasn't until the last few months of 4th grade when they finally transferred me to another classroom that I got well again. Later, my mom told me that even she thought I'd been exaggerating when I talked about how mean the teacher was. Because I left the honors class and moved down a level, my former teacher still ridiculed me pretty frequently when we crossed paths, but it didn't tie my stomach up in knots. I'm just going to read this comment here because I agree with it completely. What a vile excuse for a human being. I can't believe individuals like this get to have any authority over young children. So sorry that happened to you. Not me, but my mother. She had been very sick and tired. Imagine a cold, but it's 100 times worse. The doctor she saw multiple times kept basically blowing it off, saying she just needed some rest. It kept getting worse. One day, I was home with her. She was in bed sleeping and I was out in the living room watching TV. For some reason, she decided to walk out into the living room and sit in the chair across from the couch. She looked like a legit zombie, and when she sat down, she could barely hold her head up. I immediately called 911. Turned out she had pneumonia, and one of her lungs was entirely full of fluid, while the other was more than halfway. She spent a few days in the hospital and fully recovered. I don't know what made her decide to walk into the living room, but if she hadn't, then she would likely have died that day. All of that could have been avoided if the doctor she saw would have just paid closer attention to what was going on. I can barely remember this, but I was around the age of 11. I went for a sore throat, severe cough that would make me dry heave, phlegm, just the whole thing. Doctor says it's all in my head, despite me having an obviously inflamed throat and a very wet cough. I remember sitting there with my grandma who was like, I don't think it was in her head. I went back the same week and was diagnosed with walking pneumonia. I think that's when we switched doctors too. Not a doctor or nurse, but a bunch of camp counselors and the infirmary doc. I went to a sleepaway camp for children with cancer or anything chronic and or life-threatening. It's the second day and I wake up feeling a little bit sick with a sore throat. Okay, I'll just drink some water and I'll be okay. It's the summer after all. I can't get sick. Breakfast rolls around at 10 a.m. and I'm not hungry and my throat is getting worse. I tell one of my counselors that I'm not feeling good and he says, eat something, wait till after the morning activity. I couldn't bring myself to swallow, so I just sat there and then went to arts and crafts. I feel so sick at this point, I just sit in the corner of the arts and crafts room, literally fading in and out. I tell a different counselor and he says, drink some water. I do, it doesn't help at all. I realize that they're not going to do anything unless I make a big deal about it. I think to stand up and make an announcement. When I stand up, I immediately need to sit down again, and now my throat hurts too much to talk. I say, I don't feel good in my raspy, weak voice. He says, wait until after this activity. Lunch comes around at 12:30 and I go to the bathroom before sitting down and I look like a zombie in the bathroom mirror. I go back to my table and I say I can't eat. The counselors ask me why. I say, I feel sick. One of the counselors begrudgingly agrees to take me to the infirmary, which was a mini hospital because all the kids here have medical issues. I can barely walk, but I make it there, and promptly get sat down on an old wood bench and left alone as my counselor walks back to eat lunch. After about 15 minutes of waiting, a doctor pokes her head out of her office and asks me what's wrong. I tell her, I felt sick since I woke up, my throat hurts. She feels my forehead and says, you don't feel warm, but I'll get a thermometer. She comes back with a thermometer and puts it under my tongue. I had a fever of 102 and strep throat at a tightly packed dining hall surrounded by kids with compromised immune systems. I'm surprised I didn't get anyone sick, but the fact that it took 5 hours to get a chronically sick kid some freaking medical attention still makes my blood boil. I was bedridden for 3 days and missed literally everything I wanted to do while there. The worst part was, this was my last year before I got too old. I was losing my hair, my gums bled randomly, my skin looked like garbage, my muscles cramped up randomly, I literally fell over once while standing on my feet, I got horribly depressed, world felt like cardboard is the only way I can think to describe it, and all I wanted to do was eat and sleep. Sometimes I would start talking in conversation and get a word jumble midway through where words didn't come out right, which was the beginning of some social anxiety for me. I went to several doctors who plainly thought I was full of it. Several of them asked me how much I drank, and one of them asked me over and over again as if he didn't believe me when I said I didn't. I was tested for low thyroid, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, and some other scary things, but nothing came up. This was over a 6-month period. I finally figured it out by Googling my symptoms, which led me to a message board that suggested I find a doctor who would give me a blood test for it so I would know for sure. Turns out I was really low on B12, somewhere in the low 300s I think. They went from nearly eye-rolling me to my face to giving me a B12 shot in the office before I left on my second visit and prescribing sublingual B12 to me. I actually found out a few years later that I have a gene mutation that keeps me from methylating B vitamins. I mention it to every new doctor I see now, and they always look at me like I'm a hypochondriac, then look it up on their laptop and kind of go, okay, like they're relieved I'm not full of crap. Not exactly accused of faking it, more so just disbelieved or taken lightly. I went into emergency at the hospital because it was Saturday for a medium-level abdominal pain that had been ongoing since the previous weekend. I'd been to the general practitioner on Wednesday or Thursday and had a blood test booked for the coming Tuesday, early as possible. However, my mom decided to take me in because of how long it lasted without change. At the hospital, I had a blood test taken and the doctor thought 50 milligrams of codeine would take care of my non-problem. It did nothing, so he gave another one and Panadol. He ended up believing it would work, but it sent everyone frantic when I ended up bent over, frothing at the mouth and coughing up blood. The blood test said pancreatitis. My brother had severe asthma, as in I'd wake up in the middle of the night to paramedics and an ambulance and only ask which grandparents I was going to wake up at. He had an asthma attack in school and his second grade teacher declared that he was faking it. Another teacher, Mrs. B, who was also friends with my mom, told her that he had a very well-documented history. Several medical journal articles written about him by this point with more to follow as he got older. He was definitely having an asthma attack and needed his inhaler and possibly several breathing treatments now. We kept several different inhalers at the school, but they had to be given by the nurse. The second grade teacher once again declared she knew what an asthma attack looked like and he was faking it. Mrs. B, the friend teacher, took him out of class immediately, tried the inhalers, and called our mom. He ended up staying in the hospital for several weeks and wasn't well enough to go to school for months. The school district not only had to pay for tutors to come to our house to help him keep up with classes, but also had to pay for his medical costs since mom was also a teacher. The second grade teacher tried to get Mrs. B in trouble for removing a student from her classroom without permission and almost got fired herself for causing the situation to get as bad as it did. Mom also was granted a transfer to our elementary school, which she had been trying to get for a while to help make sure my brother's health was okay, and she helped create an amazing, successful reading program there. The school district also implemented some changes that allowed kids with rescue inhalers to be able to keep them with them instead of with the nurse, as long as certain procedures were followed. The second grade teacher, on my brother's first day back to school, declared in a loud voice, "The next time, let me know if you need your inhalers." The overprotective big sister in me took over and loudly shouted back, "He did!" The school secretary gleefully told my mom it was the first time she had ever heard me talk above a whisper.
What's the most genius 4D chess strategic move you've seen someone execute at work or in life? In my youth, I posted at a bustling Dragon Ball Z message board. One year on April Fool's, I was messaged by a particularly popular poster that he would like help pranking the board. A particularly tasteless joke. He was going to have his girlfriend post that he was involved in a car accident. To help sell the lie, he wanted me to play devastated and to attack anyone who dared imply such a thing could be a prank, as I would be the only one who knew the truth. But here's the rub. He told everyone, about 80 people, that the accident was fake and that each of us was the only person in on it. And he told each person to react in a particular way, designed to put them in conflict with the other people he had told to act in a particular way. I was told to be devastated. Someone else was told to call bullcrap. Someone else was told that they were glad he's hurt. Someone else was told to say they were donating money for his recovery, etc. He just sat back and watched the board eat itself. It was pretty funny. We spread the word that we were all going to skip the last half of the day by leaving out the doors at the disused extreme ends of the school that they usually had difficulty monitoring. One of the NHS officers had a brother who was a fireman, whose chief was a bit of a safety and regulation stickler. Sure enough, we get to school that day, and the doors at the extreme ends of the building are chained shut. NHS guy calls his brother at lunch. This was prior to cell phones, so you had to wait to use a payphone, and reports a fire hazard. Locked fire exit doors. Result: Fire Chief himself shows up and orders the high school evacuated, while he does a top-to-bottom inspection of the whole building. Adding insult to injury, a huge bunch of seniors took off during the evacuation. One of my co-workers at a previous job hated our boss. Guy was a suck-up to higher management, made our lives a living hell by not communicating actual requirements, etc., until it was too late, then bad-mouthed design to upper management and the customer. My coworker did some digging and found an old copy of the guy's resume online, polished it up, and contacted a few recruiters. Boss got headhunted out of the company. We got a new boss who wasn't a gigantic butt, and everyone was happy. I don't know if I would personally consider it a smart move, but my boss had been having heart problems for a while. He was a quadruple bypass. He basically knew it was only a matter of time till his next heart attack. He told me he was going to make damn sure it happened on company property when it came. Sure enough, a couple of weeks ago, he punched in at 6 a.m., he normally comes in around 9:30 to 10, and less than 20 minutes later, he was in an ambulance. Haven't seen him since, but my buddy at HR says he's listed for workers' comp. Worked as a low-level shift manager of a truck stop restaurant for a couple of years. My higher-ups used to do monthly inspections for FMs and quarterly inspections from VPs to see if the facility was up to company standards. I used to have everything spotless prior to a visit, except for something benign yet obvious thing, left dirty. Like the top of the buffet was a little dusty, which was easy to tell with dark-stained wood, or left ice build-up in the freezer. I did this so upper management would be distracted by the small oversight I had made, and would be less inclined to look harder for something to reprimand me on. It was a crappy corporation and were required to find something that I had to improve on every inspection. Not personally witnessed, but I'm in awe of this guy. Software dev busted for outsourcing his own job to China. Eventually, it was discovered the employee had outsourced his own job to a Chinese consulting firm, paying about $50,000 to the firm out of his own salary for several $100,000. In his blog, Mr. Valentine describes the employee as being in his mid-40s, with a relatively long tenure with the company, family man, inoffensive and quiet, someone you wouldn't look at twice in an elevator, ABC News reports. In the blog, Mr. Valentine wrote that according to the man's web browsing history, a typical workday went something like this. 9 a.m. Arrive and surf Reddit for a couple of hours. Watch cat videos. 11:30 a.m. Take lunch. 1 p.m. eBay time. 2-ish p.m. Facebook updates. LinkedIn. 4:30 p.m. End of day update email to management. 5 p.m. Go home. My grandfather pulled this move in the 1960s. Not sure it's possible or even legal anymore, but it was back when business owners had personal relationships with their bankers. Gramps had commercial properties where he rented out office space to businesses. One of his tenants was failing and about to close shop and owed him a bunch of rent to the tune of thousands of dollars. They cut him a check for the rent owed, but asked him to wait a week to deposit/cash it. Gramps knew the company wouldn't be around in a week and he'd never see his money if he waited. He took the check to the bank, they both used the same bank, and tried to cash it. Sure enough, they didn't have enough to cover the check, and the teller told him she couldn't cash it because of insufficient funds. Gramps asked how much they were short, and the teller told him about $200. So Gramps took $200 out of his own wallet and had her deposit it into their account, then cashed his check for the thousands they owed him. The next day, the owners called him furious and in disbelief that he got his check cashed, and cleaned them out at the same time. Instead of lasting another week, they were out of business that day. But Gramps got his money. Well, when you sense you're about to be screwed, grab that screwdriver and go on the offensive, I guess. Maybe not totally genius, but close. I had a colleague who worked at a very large company who was on a temporary promotion to quite a senior position. It was a position that he knew a number of other people in the company were interested in applying for, many of whom were far more qualified than him. The day eventually came when the management decided to fill the post permanently and to start the process by looking for recruits from within the company. He now faced the very real possibility that the well-paid job he'd been doing for about a year might be taken from him and handed to someone from another department. To get the recruitment process underway, the local management asked him to write the ad for the job, which would then appear in the internal job vacancies listings on the company intranet. My colleague saw his opportunity and he seized it with both hands. Firstly, he changed the job title in a way that could be justified, but made the vacancy unrecognizable to anyone skimming through the listings who was specifically looking for it. Secondly, he started the ad by focusing on some of the more obscure aspects of the job, making it sound almost like an entirely different kind of role. He only got to the core parts of the job, that people might recognize, after about 3 paragraphs. It worked brilliantly. No one else applied for the job because it was impossible to identify it from a quick read of the title and opening paragraphs. My colleague was duly appointed to it after a successful interview. I should explain that what made this such a neat trick was that the ad was for a specialist job in a company that had quite a few specialists in that field, but was mostly full of generalists. My colleague changed the title to something that sounded very generalist and also wrote the first 3 paragraphs in a generalist way, only switching to the specialist information in paragraph 4. Why I think it worked so well was because the generalists who might have been drawn to the job by its title and opening paragraphs then gave up when they realized it required specialist skills that they lacked. Meanwhile, the specialists saw only the generalist title and immediately moved on to the next ad, not realizing that it could well have been the perfect job for them. I have been around a lot of manipulation and politicking at various workplaces. I can't stand it, so I don't delve into it. So suffice to say, probably the most genius stuff was happening around me, and I failed to notice it. However, something I was particularly proud of was, when compiling reports, spreadsheets, ad copy, etc., I always typed my name in the lower right-hand corner, but set the color to white. No one sees it, it doesn't print, but when someone, cough cough, manager, cough, sends off your files as his own work to the higher-ups, along goes your signature. It came up in a discussion once where they were debating his data with my own. He had apparently sent alternative ideas in an attempt to discredit my contributions and belittle my capabilities. In a one-on-one meeting, I had them highlight the bottom right corner of all the documents he had sent under his name. They all had my name in the corner. I was working for them 2 months later. New guy in a fancy suit shows up in the office and the company president says, "He's a consultant working for me. Give him whatever he needs." Guy works with us for months, going out to lunch with us all the time, we're all getting on great. Then one day we're in the company meeting, when the president invites him up to the front of the room because he's my new boss, the VP of something or other. This guy steps out from the middle of our group like it's the big reveal of a TV show. He was undercover for the past couple of months. He asked the president to not announce his title during that time so he could investigate our department from the inside without us knowing. I'll add that while undercover, he worked in a cubicle over in the accounting department. Then, after the reveal, he moved into the executive suite. I was chosen as the representative of my senior class in a Scrabble tournament. I was against this junior girl who was the best player in the whole school. Now, I'm not exactly a pathetic player, but this girl was miles ahead in terms of Scrabble skills. It was a best out of 3 type of game, and I have already won the first round simply due to sheer luck. Halfway through the second game, however, I figured that I won't be able to win the round as my score isn't half of hers. So in order to invalidate the round, I purposely placed a wrong word in the board. I was graduating salutatorian for the whole senior class, so she really didn't think I'll get a word wrong, and let the whole game finish. Obviously, she won by a large margin. Lo and behold, one of the teachers came to check the game's progress, and he noted the non-existent word. As per the rules of the game, and the girl's insistence that she can't accept the win given the situation, we redid the whole second round. The next second round ended up in a tie, and by technicality, I actually won the whole tournament. This was probably the first strategic, albeit very manipulative, thing I've done in my life. A German hacker once hacked the source code for Half-Life 2, a video game developed by Valve Corporation, before it released, and Valve was in total panic mode. Gabe Newell, the owner of Valve, however, had a brilliant plan. He messaged the hacker's anonymous profile and told him that he was really impressed by his software genius and wanted to hire him for a new project. Gaben even sent flight tickets to Seattle to him and got a resume for him. Unfortunately for the hacker, Gabe passed his resume on to the FBI and checkmate. Imagine thinking you were the Mike Ross of this situation, only to end up in the logical conclusion for the events you had set in motion. A friend of mine started dating a girl when he was 19 and she was 18. They met at work and over time a romance developed. They were crazy about each other, but there was one problem. She was very religious and he was an atheist. One afternoon, a group of us were hanging out, and someone asked her if it was hard between them with the religious stuff. She told them sometimes it is, but she wasn't worried. She said, "In 5 years, we will be married, have a kid, and he will be going to church with me twice a week." Everyone laughed, especially because they had only been dating a couple of months at the time. Well, she wasn't completely on target. It took her 7 years, and they were married, had a kid, and he had become hyper-religious. I had a friend who essentially engineered his marriage to a very wealthy girl. Her parents are worth tens of millions. He is an extremely intelligent person and, in my personal opinion, a total sociopath. A lot of people don't see it, especially at first, but he's extremely manipulative and is always roundaboutly getting people to do things for him. Anyway, he was a struggling artist and knows that this girl is loaded, so he just targeted her and eventually married her. I knew him pretty well at the time, and it was clear that he didn't really give much of a crap about her. He then convinced her to move to Manhattan away from her family so he could pursue his art career there. They moved into a huge apartment on the 20th floor of a high-rise with an amazing balcony view. I always thought it was kind of effed up because his wife is very overweight, and I think that he used that as leverage in getting what he wanted. I don't know if it exactly fits the question, but it was kinda genius, if totally evil. Don't know the exact details, but I read a story once about a guy who bought a full-fare first-class ticket on an airline. He would go to the airport, hang out in the lounge to get free food and drink, then go down to the desk and reschedule his flight to the next day. Since it was top-tier first-class rate, the airline rescheduled with no fee. Kept doing this for something like a year until the airline caught on and told him they wouldn't reschedule anymore. At this point, he went to the desk and got his 100% refund for the ticket, since that was also airline policy. Crafty, manipulative little tykes, let me tell you. One kid absolutely had to sit in the front of the classroom. The reason for this is that he essentially controlled the other kids by giving them looks. If he was in the front, you at least had to tell because he turned around for a second or two, gave a look, and some kid chucked his maths book across the classroom. Also, after having a few classes with these kids, one kid stayed in the classroom during the break and I asked her what was wrong. Apparently 2 boys in the class were mean to her and calling her names, so I told her I'd tell the original teacher and/or the principal. I was only a sub after all and had no place disciplining children. As I talked to one of the teachers about it, I found out that the problem isn't the boys, it's 2 other girls in the class. See, these 2 girls would tell the boy to go bully this girl and be mean to her. Not because they didn't like the girl, but because they wanted the boys to get told off and disciplined for whatever reason. The bullied girl was just a tool in their eyes. If I ever need a general to confuse and misdirect my enemies in conflict, I'd recruit a 9-year-old girl. I was a general manager at a small vape shop for a while. I asked the owner for a significant raise about a week before he was leaving the country on vacation. I would be solely in charge of the shop while he was gone. I dropped a hint to a sort of friend of his that I would be gone before he got back if I didn't get the raise. I got the raise. Depending on the size of this vendor's business, this seems a little exploitative. Maybe the owner looked for a new GM when he returned. I was playing Cluedo with a girl I was trying to impress and her friends. One of the guys in the friends group was her old crush. During one of my turns, I realized that this guy, highly intelligent mother flipper, is close to the guessing room. During my turn, I decide to ask next person for the cards that I had on my hand. Of course, no one had them, which would suggest that the place, weapon, and murderer are in the bag and are the solution to the game. He took the bait. Went to the middle room and guessed all of the cards I had in my hand, effectively costing him the game. He was really surprised and couldn't fathom how that had happened. And this is when I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Unless I had all the cards I had asked for." I know it's petty, but it was enough to impress the girl at the time, and I still recall it fondly. This actually happened to me, and I don't know the actual truth of it, so this is an assumption. I was in a disciplinary hearing at a call center when I was about 20 years old for basically slagging off my manager. She was a member, to my colleague over chat. I said I would rather resign than get sacked. After the meeting, she went to see HR and asked if I would still prefer to resign. I resigned. In hindsight, 14 years later, I don't think I was getting sacked and she bluffed me into resigning, which is fantastic gamesmanship, and even though she was a complete and utter jerk, I respect that. My girlfriend lives in Australia and I live in the US. We don't spend much time together because of the distance, obviously, and because of the time difference in our schedules, we get limited, but fairly consistent amount of time we can spend together online, which is where we normally spend Skyping while playing games. Last summer, she was coming to spend about 5 weeks with me in the US, and we were both insanely excited. About a week before, my family was getting together for an early dinner, which wasn't very common as we all live on our own. My father picked me up to take me to the restaurant, and I walked in the door and saw her sitting with my mum and sister. I was absolutely speechless and couldn't even make a coherent thought. She had planned it out with my mum months in advance, and I had no idea. She sent me pictures and only messaged me at certain times so that I wouldn't catch on while she was taking the 30-hour trip over here. I cannot explain the happiness I felt and the shock I was in. In about 4 months, I'm moving to Australia to live with her, and I've never been happier in my entire life. Someone I know claims to have purposely left a pen cap leaning against a cash register drawer so that the next time their rival coworker opened the drawer, it would fall into the rail, obstructing it from closing. Leaving a register open is a big deal in retail, and apparently this had a domino effect, leading to my acquaintance to be named manager/head cashier. If I recall correctly, the cashier was on a last chance kind of thing, and was one of 2 who could work weekends. So once they were fired, the other person who currently occupied the manager/head cashier job was the other person who could work weekends, making the weekday job available, and by seniority and comparative responsibility, my acquaintance was promoted. Can't verify this actually happened, but the planning was impressive for such a low-stakes job. So I was studying this course in university, which had half of the course in practical assignments. We had to do 10 pracs throughout the semester, and the lecturer decided that the final grade you'd receive would be an average of the 10 submissions. Seemed fair. They had issues with the submission system, and so, trying to be fair, he added a rule where if you submitted late, the grade would be removed from the average. So all I did was submit the first prac on time, got full marks, submitted the rest late, and received an average grade of 100%. About 5 years ago, me and my friends went to Disneyland. One of my friends was a huge fan of the ride Big Thunder Mountain, but the line was like 150 minutes long. I issued 5 fast passes for all of us, and when the staff in the fast pass lane told us to show our passes, I told her I lost 3 of them. She checked the remaining 2 and let us go. Later, after we confirmed a different person was in charge, I showed the staff the 3 passes I was hiding. Basically, we cheated the system and rode the ride twice in the fast pass lane. So petty, yet so satisfying. I was forced to be acting manager for a company I was liking less and less. I had all the responsibility, but not the pay, and I was having to help interview actual managers. I hired someone from a company down the street, then applied there and got his job. That job was the perfect blend of a thing I was good at, well paid for, liked doing, and filled a need. Incidentally, it was my brother playing 2D chess against strangers online when we were little kids. He had an electric chessboard named Igor, and Igor was a mother flipper. We could never beat him unless he was on the lowest setting, and we played a lot of chess as kids. Anyway, my little brother set Igor to the highest level of difficulty and started a game online. The opponent made a move, and my brother would make the same move against Igor. Igor would respond, and he'd copy Igor's move in the online game. He never lost a game with this method. This guy is my hero. I remember the story from ages ago. A man gets a credit card contract through the post. Usual stuff, sign the contract and send it back, get the credit card. He changes the contract terms and conditions to like 0% APR, no limit, no late payment fees, etc. Basically, free money for life. The company doesn't check the contract, countersigns, and sends him the credit card. He maxes it out, the company stops the card, he sues the company, and wins. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.